The Wheeling Plan Commission meeting for Thursday, February 8th is called to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Secretary, please take the roll.
Commissioner Planova.
Here.
Commissioner Creech.
Present.
Commissioner Dorbian.
I'm here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Kalis.
Good evening.
Commissioner Powers is here, and Chairman Rafato.
Here. Brooke, any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Citizen concerns and comments. Mr. Secretary.
Citizens' concerns and comments at other village public bodies meetings. Members of the general public may address the Plan Commission with concerns or comments regarding issues relevant to the Plan Commission's agenda or topics that the Plan Commission has the authority pursuant to the village code to address. The chairperson or his or her designee shall strictly restrain comments to matters that are relevant to the Plan Commission's business and shall not permit repetitious comments or arguments. Members of the general public who wish to address the Plan Commission must sign a request to speak prior to the commencement of the public hearing. A person submitting a petition, concern, or other comment shall be allotted 5 minutes to present their point.
Is there anybody on the list?
Yes, we have Mr. Stylen.
Mr. Stylen.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You have 5 minutes, sir.
Just to bring you up to date on my quest for information on property maintenance, and hopefully that the Plan Commission maybe takes a look at it. I was able to find out that the Village Hall does have a copy of the 2012 Property Maintenance Manual, as well as the library does. I went over to the library and took a look at what they had, and they do have it. It's readily available. You can't check it out, but you can look at it while you're there. It's a reference item. The one thing that I did notice, however, is that the village, when they enacted the property maintenance ordinance, passed a bunch of corrections and or additions to that manual, about a page's worth, and at least at the copy of the manual that the library has, there is no indication of any changes and or additions that the village might have made. I'd really suggest maybe that the village put an insert in the library copy of the manual to indicate what the village ordinances and changes are. And about a year or two ago, there was a well-known person in town who was cited a property maintenance violation, I believe, because their hedges or trees were higher than the wall that was at the entrance to their complex. And I looked through the property maintenance manual and the village ordinances, and I was unable to see any reference at all to the height of trees and shrubs. As a matter of fact, they are specifically excluded in that document from any height limitations. So I'll probably be submitting a FOIA request to find out about what area that particular property maintenance violation was taken against, because maybe there's somewhere else besides the property maintenance manual or the village ordinances that pertain to maintenance of our properties. So I'll keep looking around and keep you guys informed, and I hope that you guys take a look at the manual. I did inform the chairman that there is a copy of the manual online. It's not quite legal to look at it because it is a copyrighted document, but some town, other town in, I believe it was South Dakota, North Dakota, managed to put it in their public viewable records.
Which most likely is probably not legal, if it's copyrighted, from what I understand.
I think it is copyrighted.
Right, so they probably shouldn't be publishing it.
Probably should not have put it up there, yes. So, anyway, I'll keep you informed. Thank you much for your time.
Thank you. So, is there anyone else?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Brooke, just a couple of comments. I would normally wait until the end, but because it was brought up, do we, as the Plan Commission, we're not responsible for that code, the property maintenance code?
That's correct.
So our interaction, if there is any, is in zoning. And
That's
if there
right.
is,
There's a little bit of overlap in the zoning code, which talks about shrub heights, like Mr. Stylen was discussing, and some other aspects of landscaping that relates to the property maintenance code. But the Plan Commission does not review the property maintenance code of the municipal code.
right. And I don't understand the mechanics, and Mr. Stylen mentioned that it's a copyrighted, how do we use that? I mean, we just take the code and,
We have local amendments, I believe, and
Right.
Mallory, maybe you could discuss this.
Yes, within the village's code, we adopt the IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code, but then specifically set forth any local amendments in which where we differ from the
and the amendments are part of the property code, not the zoning code.
property code,
Property
correct?
code. So, and it's all around maintenance, and maintenance is violations that we see, that we collectively, the village reports on.
Right, usually through resident complaints or if code enforcement officers observe them in the course of their duties.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Stein is asking for a FOIA on, do you have the property code? Did you get the FOIA on the property code, Terry?
Yes.
So you have a copy of it?
No,
No, you can't have a copy of
I
it.
have a copy, and it's $127 to purchase it.
We can start a GoFundMe page if you'd like. So, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Consent items, none. Wow, okay. Items for review. Docket number PC 18-2, CMX, Building J of the Wheeling Town Center Development. Site plan and appearance approval of facade modifications. Brooke?
I don't have anything at this time. I would just invite the petitioner to come forward.
That would be all of you. Whoever wants to come up.
So,
If you could state your name and business address, please. Thank you, sir.
sure, I'm Tom Rael. I'm the architect for the tenant CMX for the cinema. Our practice is in New York City, 17 Park Place, New York, 10007. And what we have been working on for a few months now is formally the major appearance change of the cinema. And through a couple of workshop sessions and some back and forth, what we present tonight is our earnest response to all of the comments made and suggestions made during those workshop sessions. And the primary thing that we needed to do for CMX, as they're now growing in the U.S. market, their first cinema being in Miami, their second one here nearby in Skokie at Old Orchard, the first of two that are going to be in that shopping center, and then various ones that I'm also working on in other parts of the country. Actually, another one nearby in across the street from Wrigley Field. The primary thing is to start to establish a brand standard of appearance. And that was the main driver of needing to update the appearance of this particular cinema, which I believe was presented and approved in 2016, maybe? Yeah, 2016, before even their first cinema was under construction in Miami. And this is going to be one of the very first projects that is which is a ground-up project, or also referred to as a pad project, where the landlord developers deliver my client Cinemex pad, and we basically take it from there. We construct the shell, and then the interior build out. So what we've originally presented was there were very specific certain comments made, and what we've come back to the board with is what we're seeing on the screen above. And the primary thing that we did, while addressing the brand standardization of these new cinemas, is to create something that is unique to our specific location and setting. So we're at, not only are we on the Village Green, but we're also at what I refer to as the gateway to the Village Green. So we're in a very prominent location. And so at the north end, what we did was not just situate the entrance to the cinema. Of course, that's what we're going to do. But we also designed the most important corner at that gateway to the Village Green in a way that would make a direct visual connection between the activity of the cinema proper, and in this case, the lounges that flank a bar in the round, if you will. And then we wanted to make a major statement, not just for the cinema, but for the Village Green as well, and maybe even for the village of Wheeling at a larger and a greater scale. So the main thing was to situate to locate and articulate the lounges that are unique to how Cinemex operates their cinemas around a bar, and to create a dynamic element. And in our case, we call it the light tower, or the Tower of Light. So I live in Manhattan, and we've lived there since 2009. And every year on September 11th, they remember the events of that day by creating towers of light, 2 towers of light, where the original Twin Towers resided. And we're just fortunate because out of our front window, we can see the lights that are displayed for, I think, 2 or 3 nights over that period. But they're remarkable in their presence, but also, I mean, what's simpler than a ray of light, And in that case, there's an incredible amount of symbolism. And so, just with that in mind, we said, well, what can we do, not just with our entry and our marquee? Yeah, we want a tower that will obviously serve as signage for the cinema, but what else could it be? And for us, it became our Tower of Light, or our light tower. So, yes, it's a tower that marks the entrance to the cinema, the gateway to the Village Green, but now we want to project light from the top of it to serve as a beacon for the cinema, the village, and the development as well. So that's our major element. That's our major move, while still maintaining the brand standard finishes and materials that we're using actually in other locations. And then the other thing, our other major move was how do we articulate and break up and create visual stimulus to our large, tall walls for our auditorium. So a quality cinema has stadium seating for large screens and for unobstructed sight lines. And in this case, it's combined with luxury reclining seats. So what that does is leads to somewhat tall walls. And the first move that we did was to break up the visual height of those walls with a 10-foot-high band along the entire perimeter of the bottom with fiber cement panels, which I have samples of here this evening. And then above that, we're utilizing premium decorative CMU block. And we're working with a regional Illinois-based company called Echelon. And what we're doing is creating a striated, articulated pattern with 4 colorways of the premium block. I'm sorry, yeah, 4 colorways of the premium block. But then in addition to those 4 colorways, which again relate to brand standard colors of the cinema company, but we're also now going to use 3 different textures. So we're going to range from what the manufacturer calls polished, sometimes referred to as burnished, but this manufacturer refers to theirs as polished. And then there's a ground, and then there's a texture. So again, 4 colorways, 3 textures to create a rich and textural, patterned appearance to the walls above our gray fiber cement base of the cinema. And you'll see that in the materials here and then in the renderings as well. Those are the major moves that create a cinema that is unique to our setting here as part of the Village Green, and also maintain the brand standard, the brand standardization that the company is implementing. And with that, and I think one of the last concerns from our second second set of work sessions were the maintenance aspect of the CMU. And so you'll see, especially in certain types of light, even the textured, but certainly the ground and especially the polished, you'll see a sheen, a kind of slight reflectivity. And what that is the impregnated material that the manufacturer uses for 2 reasons. One, to minimize the adherence of dust, airborne dust, and also to make it easier to maintain if it ever needs to be cleaned or maintained otherwise. Now that came with the original selection of this particular product by this particular manufacturer, but it was brought up in our second set of workshop sessions. So if any of you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Can you describe, using the elevations, one of the elevations?
Sure.
Where you're going to use the materials so the Plan Commission knows, like for instance, you have some metal there where that's going to be just using your mouse pointing out the colors and things like that, so we all know.
So let me start off with the major element, which is the light tower, which folds into the marquee and then bends down to become an end wall for one of the 2 lounges. So that material will be I'll hold this up as well. So that material will be the charcoal gray metallic panel. This is the same panel that was utilized for certain portions at Old Orchard. So if you have had the opportunity to visit that cinema, there's a signage tower, not a true tower like ours, but a signage tower and a kind of semicircular marquee. That material is what you're seeing here. So that's part of the brand standardization across the chain. And so we're cladding the tower, all sides of the tower here, the front face and the underside of the marquee, and then all sides of the end wall here. And then the fiber cement panels that break down the height of the auditorium walls is this material here at the bottom. And the quality of the material, as is the case with the CMU blocks, the premium CMU blocks, is that the material is the same through and through. It's not a coating, it's not a layering. When you cut this material, you're cutting through the actual fiber cement, through the entire thickness of the material. And then the third major material is a lighter charcoal gray sheet metal paneling, and that's what you're seeing in this middle portion here. And so and it's funny, I'll be using the same panel board, material board, for another project that we're designing in Forsyth County, North Georgia, just north of Atlanta. The design is a little different because the format there is different, but the major elements are, the major materials are exactly the same. And then finally, what you're seeing on the upper portion of the auditorium walls is the variated, I call it striated pattern, utilizing not only the 4 different colorways of our premium CMU block, but what's a little more difficult to discern would be the different textures that we're using every time we repeat that particular colorway. And yeah. Any questions?
Okay. We will get to that.
Okay.
So one more thing, though, Brad, this might be you to discuss, is the decrease in the seating. If you could just describe that before we go into questions from the Plan Commission.
Sure, no problem. I think there was a slight decrease in the seating. It was reflected in the most recent updated parking study that was submitted to the village staff members. So if anything, it's a positive effect on the parking ratio, which I know is a big concern for everybody.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
So we'll go to the Plan Commission. We'll start with Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Not a whole lot on this. The material that's at the bottom, the first 10 feet, that's, yeah. Now, that's very durable, salt resistant and all that?
Yeah, very good question.
And how thick is it?
Excuse me,
actual
Mr.
use?
Rail, can you come up to the mic? We also have a handheld mic over here.
Yeah, so we're using 1/4-inch thick panels, and the material originally was developed in Europe as a replacement to asbestos paneling that was used as a substrate for tiling and other masonry applications. And so it had to be durable from its original intent as a substrate material. But what happened is that the material had such an intrinsic quality of touch and quality of color that architects started to use it as a finished material before it was further developed as an actual exterior and interior, but primarily exterior finish material. So and that's one of the reasons that it is the same through and through, because it's a material, fiber cement material that is produced under high pressure, right? In other words, it's a very dense material. So it's dense, and it's referred to also as being impervious to moisture penetration, right? Now, you have to deal with joints, or it could be used as a rain screen application, but that's the basis, the durability basis of it.
And this is affixed directly onto a solid wall?
In our case, we're going to use a rain screen. So there'll be the waterproof rain screen against the probably dense glass backing panels. That will be the rain. That'll be the waterproofing, and then these panels will be attached with probably Z-clips or resilient channels, which is typical in an exterior application when you have a rain screen. It can be used as the actual, ceiling material, but then it's not as, you're gonna, in that case, you would see not grout, but caulking, exterior caulking. You might see exposed fasteners, things like that. But we're using it in its more kind of pure state.
Okay. The new design is great. I had some concerns of the original one with the perforated panels that you didn't work on. That was a problem for me in the past. This design is much, much nicer.
Thank you.
The uplights shown around the perimeter of the building. It's got to go to a night scene.
Yeah, and so sometimes in the planter wells, but but in light wells that we'll create, we just want to visually in the evening and at the night, we just want to break up the linearity of that base by creating backdrops to the trees where we have trees to cast those in silhouette, which is always really nice. I mean, I haven't gotten into the details of the landscape lighting, but I would suspect that they also have uplighting in planters, not just near the cinema, but in the village green. But where we have trees and where we know we're going to have planters, we're going to want to accentuate those, with lighting.
No, because later tonight, those would be covered. with
Oh,
snow.
yeah. When it snows?
Yeah.
Especially now with LEDs, because LEDs
Yeah.
create very little heat, so it doesn't melt off the snow.
All right, so I was just wondering, how you were going to address that. I guess that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great design.
Commissioner Creech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also was a little concerned about the cement fiber panels on the first 10 feet of the cinema. You said that you're only using quarter-inch panels?
Quarter-inch because
And you're going to apply it to dense glass?
There'll be resilient furring channels in front of the rain screen. And we haven't detailed the wall construction, but normally we'll have dense glass.
So this is going to be flush with the cement blocks above? Same plane, or is it going to stick out past?
No, we'll detail it so that it's flush.
Okay. The only other thing that I was concerned about is the rear elevation or the west elevation that's facing the train depot. And on the previous one, you had, at least they had a sign showing exactly what this was. I would like to see a CMX sign on the back or something to
And
break that up a little, but.
Yeah, we very well may. I mean, we haven't fully developed the signage program, but to that point, one of the other things that we wanted our light tower to do is to be visible from all sides. Not that there won't be additional signs on those walls, but that wherever you were, whether you're at the entrance to the apartment building at the south end of the village green, driving into, the development off of Dundee, or even from the metro station, on the backside. That either at the front of the cinema or beyond, on the other side of the cinema, would be the glowing tower and the Tower of Light visible. The reason that we haven't dropped in any signage yet is I haven't given a deep dive into the signage ordinance, the size limitations and the signage guidelines. But rest assured there will be signage on the auditorium walls proper. We just haven't developed that program yet.
Yeah, it's a big canvas there.
It is.
Not a lot.
It is.
Again, I'm still a little concerned about that cement board on the first 10 feet. I don't know. I'm not crazy about the battens every 4 feet and that's all I have really.
Thank you. Commissioner Blanova,
Thank you.
put your microphone down, please.
Yeah, that would be
Thank you.
I don't have any concerns except the tower light. You have a silly one. It's not going to be too bright for, we have an airport here. It's not going to interfere with the planes and the airport.
As
I mean,
far
I know
as
it's
I know,
gonna be
I
visible.
haven't studied the flight patterns.
Okay.
But, I mean, the thing about the Tower of Light is, on a clear night, it would have to be very, very bright. On any other kind of night, very little light. That's the great thing about light at night.
Got it.
Very little light is very visible at night, especially when it's not competing with anything else. You know, so with respect to the lighting levels, that's something that we'll have to develop and determine. In any case, the light's going to be variable. It's going to be dimmable depending on, you know, the conditions. And but that certainly will be one of the things that we'll study in detail when we get into the construction documentation of the cinema, for sure.
Just to let you know, we did have a workshop meeting, and Ray Lang was a member. The initial feedback was actually positive that it would be beneficial for the airport.
Oh, it's beautiful. I have
as
no
opposed
doubts
to a
about it.
hindrance.
It's going to
So-
be beautiful. I don't have any other questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kalis.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a newer commissioner, so I wasn't part of the original approval, so I don't know all the details of what was approved versus the changes here. So I liked the glass, how it looked, but obviously with brand standards, you're stepping it down a bit. I think in general, it's like he said on the south elevation, the blank canvas is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Like I Googled some other CMX cinemas in that red, the little speck of red. So according to brand standards, if there was some red involved somewhere, I've seen other places, that gives it a nice contrast. So I'm big on contrast, and the previous design had textured elements that were different directions. So it was pleasing to the eye, and this is just a little less, you know, visually stimulating to the eye, especially one of the points of the town center is when people come in on the train, they have to be like, wow, this is amazing. And the light tower is great. I think that's, as a Batman fan, that's, it's a great
That's a
bat
good
signal.
reference, actually.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I
The
thought
Klieg
of.
light.
Yes. So that it's stunning for sure, and it's a nice thing. So in general, I was just curious if it was considered to have any more of that red color to kind of offset some of the grays
certainly
and white.
in the signage. So in all of there's three major corporate color signage colorways.
Yeah.
But in each one of them is I call it the Cinemex red.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a deep
Deep.
red, and that'll be
So in
part
the
of all of
signage,
the
got it.
signage. Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm missing is like, it'll probably look a lot different with signage and things like that.
Yes.
And the south elevation had no trees along, so it was just kind of a blank canvas, so.
Yeah.
I echo his concern about that, but
Thank you.
we'll see how that goes. And then my question was, why was it changed? But according to brand standards, I guess you're just trying to keep it in line with other things, so that is it from me.
Thank you.
Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have concern about the fiber cement panel base. I know you said 1/4 inch. Do we have like a manufacturer's name? What is it? Because I hear fiber cement panel, I'm thinking like stucco or ephes. I assume it's not like that.
No.
And you said it's impervious, and I think at our last meeting, the chairman brought up about, you know, water problems and stuff like that, so I assume it's fine. It's just like, do we know what the actual material is called? Is staff aware of it?
Yeah, the manufacturer is called Sembrit.
Okay.
And they have names to their different product lines. But this particular product line is called, let's see, the manufacturer is Sembrit, and the product line is, I believe, Aetna, right? They have like 4 or 5. But they're all fiber cement panels, and it has to do with the texture and sometimes color. But the corporation is called Sembrit.
Okay, so it's not it's not quite the quality of what the CMU is, but it's similar, and you guys feel good that it's nice and solid and stuff like that?
The primary difference is that it's more, to the touch, it's smoother. It is more flannel-like, and it will take light during the daylight. During the daytime, it'll take light differently, and it'll add to the kind of richness and variation of, the entire facade with the premium CMU panels above.
And you use that on other buildings that you build out, other CMXs use it? Okay. I just want to clarify.
Ones that we're working on.
Correct.
Yeah.
And above that is going to be a combination of various coarseness or polished, whatever, the CMU block. So that's all, you guys are just going to variate that and to make the wall look that way.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I forgot, not only are we using 4 different colorways and 3 different textures of those colorways, we're also using standard 8-inch coursing, so 8 by 16, but also 4-inch by 16 coursing.
Okay.
So it's going to add to the richness of the pattern of the variation. It's in the drawings. It's kind of like you have to really look at it, with a, in fine detail. But I'm glad you reminded me of that.
Okay, and then I agree with Commissioner Creech about, the back of the building, the train. I know we saw renderings before. Hopefully that'll be broken up a little bit with some signage.
Yes.
Otherwise, I think it's great. It'll look really nice. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Dorbin.
Thank you. I like the design. I like the way it looks. I think it looks really, really nice.
Thank you.
I like the textures and everything. The only thing I would ask is before this goes to the board is that you make sure all the text indicates 8 instead of 10 theaters.
Auditoriums?
Yeah, because
Did I accidentally say 10?
in some cases it says 10, and in other cases it says 8. So if you just
Must be a typo. I'll make sure.
Yeah,
to catch
just make
those.
sure that gets cleaned up before it goes to the board.
Okay.
That's the only thing I ask.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, that's it.
Just a comment about the top, the cap. What is the construction of the cap?
Oh, it's going to be the same sheet metal.
Okay,
Like the cap flash?
yes.
Yeah, it'll be that. So it'll tie those 2 walls there that you're seeing above the bar volume. It's going to be that same material.
Okay. And then the lounges, is the glass going to be able to be opened?
No.
No, so it's fixed.
Now, it is now. Originally, it was
I
proposed that they would be telescoping glass doors that would open the lounges spatially to the village green. And then in the health department's review of the proposal, they pointed out, if you do that, we'll consider it a outdoor patio, or they'll consider it outdoor dining, and then a whole layer of restrictions come into play. A 2-foot-high pony wall would have to be erected, which kind of like defeats the purpose. But more importantly, it would adversely affect the operation of the cinema, the service of the beverage program at the bar, and what the cinema calls the marketplace, the kind of place where you pick up whatever you want to purchase, would literally have to be walled off from the entry and the bar. And that just is a non-starter from an operation standpoint. So the proposal was revised for floor to ceiling, but fixed glazing.
Okay, yeah, cool. And then the last thing is just around the reduction from 10 to 8. It looks like you still have 2 big theaters.
Yes.
And did they increase in number? This is 181. I think the originals were 168. And it looks like the smaller ones went from 40-something. Wait, I have it here. Hold on.
Yeah.
49 to 68. And then the larger ones were 155 to 160, 181. So you're, in essence, removing a couple of theaters. Why the change in the configuration?
Again, part of from an operational standpoint, it's part of the brand, I guess the maturing of the brand operations of this format, which is the market format. And which involves service by the staff. And so, not only on this cinema, but on the other ones that we're working on, from the original, what Cinemex referred to when we were retained as the prototypes, those prototypes for the U.S. market were developed in Mexico City, but now that things are now completely transitioning to being designed from the concept stage to the final stage in the United States, it's part of that maturing of how they're going to operate the different formats, the dine-in, and then in this case the market format, which tightly involves how it's serviced by the staff. My sense is that they're able to affect a much higher level of service when they have fewer auditoriums, and of course when you have fewer number of seats. But across all of our projects, our prototypes, I mean the prototypes that were given to us as reference, all of them have fewer auditoriums and fewer seats across both formats.
Thank you. I was at a theater the other day, and they had 20 theaters. I don't know how, 20 theaters and 2 floors. Wow, that was a lot. These are going to be much more intimate, and really,
Yes.
yeah, I agree with that. And one last question. We talked about the materials, the base material, and you say you've used that. Has there been an application like north of the Mason-Dixon line where it gets cold, you know, and a lot of snow and things like that?
Yeah, I was just telling Joshua, because he said that he had seen it clad in a building in his neck of the woods in New Jersey, and there's a brand new building, a mixed-use commercial office building in Brooklyn on Flatbush that did 2 things. It used the fiber cement panels, but they did essentially what we're doing with the CMU blocks. So as I mentioned, there's different product lines, and they used one that is more kind of feathery, but they used all of the different colorways of that product line. So in the same way that we've created this variated pattern of different colored bands, they used the same kind of pattern, but with the fiber cement panels. And they used them with a rain screen. So they're not trying to use them to seal the building, they use it as a rain screen, right? But our facades are actually going to be richer than even those, and those are very dynamic, especially on Flatbush, which is undergoing incredible revitalization. But because what the use of only the fiber cement panels doesn't have is the ability to vary texture, and we're using 3 different textures. So to answer your question, yes, it's becoming more prevalent, and the reason is because I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, architects started using this, substrate material as a finished material. The manufacturer develops it now as a bona fide exterior cladding material in Northern Europe, and these manufacturers now are setting up shop in major metropolitan, cities. They're sales offices with sales reps, right, to get the word out amongst designers and architects. So that's one current recent example of the use of that in a cold climate.
One last question about the CMU. You mentioned premium.
Yes.
And that is in relation to the grade. So that manufacturer makes a premium and then something that's a little less. How do How do they differentiate? You've got a premium, which I think is like the highest level, whatever they're doing.
Yes.
So if you didn't use premium, let's just use the example that it would be called standard. What would the differences be? Is it not as thick? Is it?
Oh, the main difference is that, and they don't even do, what is it called? Split face.
Right, yeah.
Well, split face is just CMU, and they just cast it with texture on one side, but it's still just CMU. It's just, its color is a function of the cement and the aggregate. Here, they actually formulate that mix. So yeah, of course, there's a cement component, but they formulate and design the aggregate mix, and that's why when you see this, through and through, you're seeing that they're carefully selecting the aggregate mix, the aggregate size, right? And then the cement mixture, or the cement admixture, if you will, that creates the bonding agent for that aggregate. And so, here you're seeing, what are we seeing? 12 different colors. They have over 200 different colors, right? And so that goes, I think that goes to the premium aspect of the material. And the premium is, how they refer to it in their literature. They're not trying to be a structural concrete block company by any means. Although, that said, it is designed to structural, levels of integrity, right?
Cool. Great. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have one more question. Just looking at someone mentioned the restructuring inside, and I'm looking at the plans from 10 to 8. What happened to the kitchen? Is there not a kitchen? I don't see it in the new, are you not serving food anymore?
There is. It's difficult to see. So what we did is, this is the portion of the market off of the entry that is not below an auditorium. In other words, its ceiling will be the ceiling, the same ceiling as the bar. And then underneath the rear highest seating rows of Auditorium 1, we're capturing space below that.
Okay.
Right? So if this is the ground floor, by the time this auditorium gets up here, we're going to capture that space there.
Okay.
And that's where the kitchen's going to be located. A portion of the market where the pickup counters are.
Okay.
But the back of house, behind door portion, kitchen portion.
Okay, it's because it's not indicated on
Yeah.
here. I was just curious if you were not
Yeah,
making food anymore all of a sudden.
That's what these broken lines are indicating, the walls that are below the auditorium,
Okay.
the rows. Again,
You may want to indicate that. I mean, I'm not an architect, so I don't know that. I don't know, just for the village board, they may have the same questions.
yeah, we can certainly point that out.
Any other questions?
I have another question, please.
Yes.
The concrete blocks that you're using randomly on the exterior, so do you have a pattern that you're working with, or is it just...
We took quite a bit of time developing. There's a very clear distinction, or there's a very important distinction between arbitrary and random. Arbitrary is just whatever happens, you just throw it up, and then it's arbitrary. Our use of the random process is to carefully select the colors and the textures, but then to literally design the dynamic random pattern of all of those striated color bands. So as it appears in the 3D model rendering, but also in the straight-on elevations, we designed that random patterning. To create that richness of texture, color, and variation.
So out of those colors that you showed us on your sample board.
Yeah, there are four colorways, yeah.
Okay, so the burnished ones and the rough patterned ones, excuse me, are all going to be intermingled?
Yeah, so what we'll do, it's a very good question. So what we can see here, and it's tough because even in a high resolution rendering, so you'll see the different colorways. So for example, that band is probably this colorway. And this band here is one of these two colorways. And then, of course, the lightest color band would be this colorway. And then, once we've established the colors of the band, then we'll add in the second layer of richness and variation by saying, well, that band's going to be polished. This band is going to be ground. That band will be rough.
So it'll be, the band itself will be all that particular product, like the polished one, or it'll be all the rough one, or
Yeah,
all the medium one?
Yeah, so each band will
Okay,
have.
so it's not going to change on bands?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no.
All right, that was my question.
Yeah. That would be a little too much. Too much brain damage.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sure.
Any other questions? So there a motion on docket number PC 18-2?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Dorban, second by Commissioner Johnson. Mr. Secretary.
Commissioner Dorban?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonova?
Yes.
Commissioner Creech?
Yes.
Commissioner Kalis?
Yes.
Commissioner Powers votes yes, and Chairman Rafato.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Brad, you just have to sign something. Just sign that one. And this one's yours. You can keep it. Thanks, Brett. Calling docket number 2018 1A and B. Eagle Gourmet Cafe, 1201B West Dundee Road. Zoning variation to reduce required parking for a restaurant. And 1B, special use site plan approval for a sit-down restaurant. Mr. Secretary.
2018-1A and B, Andrew Sabello, on behalf of A&A Entertainment Lessee, is seeking the following for property at 1201 West Dundee Road, which is zoned B2 Neighborhood Commercial District. Variation from Title 19 zoning of the 2018-1A, variation from Title 19 zoning of the Wheeling Municipal Code, Chapter 19.11, General Development Standards, Section 19.11.010, Off-Street Parking and Loading, Section E, Parking Standards, Subsection 1, Minimum Required Parking for Land Use Category and associated sections to reduce the required parking for a restaurant, and 2018-1B, Special Use Site Plan Approval as required under Title 19 zoning of the Wheeling Municipal Code, Chapter 19-06, Commercial Districts, Chapter 19-10, Use Regulations, Chapter 19-12, Site Plan Approval Requirements and associated sections in order to establish a sit-down restaurant. Standards for variation. A zoning variation is intended to be a method of adjustment to equalize regulations where Title 19 of the Village of Wheeling zoning has created an unnecessary hardship. A variation is designed to allow affected property owners the same rights and privileges that others enjoy in the same zoning district. In order to be granted a variation, a petitioner is required to demonstrate through testimony to the Plan Commission at the public hearing why the request meets the conditions of the village code, including but not limited to how their individual situation is unique or unusual. Prior to the public hearing, the petitioner provides written statements meant to show that the request for variation meets the standards established in Title 19. The commission chairperson will typically direct that these statements be entered into the record without a full reading of them at the hearing. Based upon the testimony and supporting materials submitted, the Plan Commission will make findings in support of or against the petitioner's testimony and report those findings to the Village Board. Standards for a special use. A zoning special use is defined in Title 19 of the Village of Wheeling zoning is a use of a parcel of land that requires review and consideration before approval due to circumstances or effects on the surrounding properties that may adversely affect them. In order to be considered for a special use, the petitioner is required to demonstrate through testimony to the Plan Commission at the public hearing why the request meets the conditions of the village code, including but not limited to how the proposed use will not damage the enjoyment or use of the surrounding properties. Prior to the public hearing, the petitioner provides written statements meant to show that the request for a special use meets the standards established in Title 19. The Commission chairperson will typically direct that these statements be entered into the record without a full reading of them at the hearing. Based upon the testimony and supporting materials submitted, the Plan Commission will make findings in support of or against the petitioner's testimony and report those findings to the Village Board. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good job there. Brooke, anything?
Yes, I'd like to start to say that the staff reports and submittal of the petitioner are part of the public record. Also, I'd like to note that the staff report stated that a revised floor plan was anticipated in order to meet several health code requirements. The applicant and health officer have met and come to agreement on food preparation methods. The health officer now believes a revised floor plan is unnecessary and that all other health code requirements will be addressed at permit.
Thank you. Good evening, sir. Will you be the only one speaking tonight on this matter?
No, Andrew and Amy Shabillo will be
Okay, so if
testifying.
you could please come up, whoever's going to speak, you could just stay right there. Could you all please raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you give tonight to be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. So as you come up to speak, if you give your name and business address, that would be great. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Shane from the law firm of Shane Banks, 70 West Madison, Chicago. We represent Andrew and Amy Shabillo requesting approval of the special use and the parking variation that was just explained. Andrew and Amy and their family own the White Eagle Restaurant, Banquet Hall, and Restaurant for over 40 years in Niles, sold it about 3 years ago, and have been looking for a location to place their Eagle Gourmet concept. I think that Andrew will explain what his concept is, will also explain, and we'll also talk about some of the standards that we believe we meet in granting the special use and the variation. I think we're at a little disadvantage following that great presentation. We don't have light towers sculptured outside, but we're going to have some of the best food in the village of Wheeling. So we'd appreciate it if you'd give Andrew a chance to testify. Thank you.
I think he's prejudiced.
This is very exciting for me. I'm Andrew Shabillo. Address 8542 Crane, Niles.
That's fine.
And am I missing anything?
No.
Good. Okay, so I just get my notes in order here, and I promise to be brief as I can. Okay, so my name is Andrew Shabillo, and my wife and I, we seek to establish a restaurant which is thematically Eastern European and will be called the Eagle Gourmet Cafe. The food and beverage will be representative delicacies of Poland, Austria, Czech Republic, and Baltic states, but mainly Polish, because that's what we know best. Menu items will include, but not limited to, our famous White Eagle mushroom barley soup and other soups, smoked sausage, panini sandwich, platter with sides, variety of pierogies, stuffed dumplings, hunter stew, salads, European style, punchki, and gourmet donuts, coffee, espresso, regular coffee, and teas. Beverages will include soft drinks, East European and domestic beers and wines. It is estimated that the hours for the Eagle Gourmet Cafe will be similar to the typical diner hours of 7 a.m. until 12 a.m., 7 days a week. The prime hours of operation will be from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. until 8 p.m. The hours of operation and level of food preparation should warrant one manager with flexible hours, 3 full-time employees, 2 part-time employees. Additionally, the facility may require part-time food prep purveyor of the food product. Note that the 3 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees will be hired from the near immediate area. Let me just conclude this section by saying, finally, may we state that this business will be owned and operated by my wife and myself under the corporate entity of A&A Entertainment. My wife, Amy, has been in customer service all of her life, starting with her father's Logan Square grocery store, AT&T, right after high school, convenient food store owner, she had a J.J. Peppers, Nordstrom manager, and for the last 17 years in senior management at the Cook County Clerk of the Circuit Courts. She is now retired. I am, and Andrew, am born and raised in the hospitality business. My father, right after World War II, came out of Europe and opened a banquet hall in the old neighborhood, Ukrainian Village, Humboldt Park. And for 43 years, I was the manager and co-owner of the White Eagle Banquets and Restaurant in Niles. Additionally, I've been a bank director. I've been a municipal elected official. I performed in a leadership role in the Polish-American community and directed cases at the Cook County Zoning Board of Appeals. I am now retired from all full-time employment. The cafe operation, if I can just speak to this, because I know Ms. Jones and we spoke of it. The establishment will not have a full kitchen because with the menu items that we're anticipating, it doesn't need to. The food will be prepared off-site but rethermalized on-site. And your own health inspector has looked at the equipment and found it quite acceptable to bring the food up to therm. Now, basically, it's much like a Panera Bread or a lot of other places that serve soup. They don't actually make it there, but it is good and it will be made to my recipe. I would like to, and this hasn't been given to staff, so if I can just read it in the record. This is from Tomasz Vojdila. He is the owner-operator of Lone Tree Manor. Dear Mr. Przybilla, per our meeting last month and our subsequent conversation this past week, I will make a commitment to be your supplier of choice in your new endeavor, the Eagle Gourmet Cafe in Wheeling. I understand that I will produce for your facility per a formalized ordering process certain foods that we have discussed. Mainly my kitchens will make the famous mushroom barley soup and other soups per your family recipe. We will make, according to your specifications, the pierogi, hunter stew, and upon occasion other prepared food items. And then he talks about the cost of such foods would be sold to myself at wholesale level, and he thanks me for the opportunity to be my purveyor of prepared foods. Item number 3, I've stated that the peak hours of the restaurant is projected to be 11 p.m. to 1 p.m. Maybe I haven't, but I'm doing it now, and 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I am told by the owner of the laundromat that the peak hours there are weekdays, late afternoon, and evenings, going in after the dinner hour. Weekdays, it's all day, but in a less dynamic format, because people come anytime they want on Saturday. Typically, they're not working. So the point of that is, in terms of what we'll know later be the parking variation, the hours are compatible for this facility and what I'm trying to do. Peak hours for staffing are 2 employees during lunch and 3 employees for the dinner hour. There will be a maximum of 7 to 10 employees on a rotating shift, never more than 3 employees at one time. Projected guests will be mostly of groups of 2 and 3, although there will be singles, and maybe there will be a table of 4 or 5, so forth. It is strongly believed that the users of the laundromat will also be guests of the Eagle Gourmet Restaurant Cafe. We see great, strong compatibility there. Carry-out food is not believed to produce a large revenue stream in the first year, and I don't know how it would work in subsequent years, but as an aside, when we were selling the White Eagle 2 years ago, the owner wanted a full report on our financials, and so he said, what does the deli do within our building? And it turns out that we were selling in the deli $250,000 a year in just this soup that was carried out. So it could happen, but if that's the case, then I would expand the footprint, or I would move the location, because right now, my wife and I are not rich. We sold the White Eagle, but it wasn't a huge monetary thing for us. So we're trying to start this slow and make as much money as we can on a restricted basis. And then if we can, then of course I would produce my own food from scratch, as I know how to. The original floor plan submitted based upon the business plan called for 16 dining seats, 14 lounge type, and 5 gaming. The parking variation requested is due to the hardship presented in the ordinance, which requires a restaurant to have 30 dining seats. The more the better, but my financial plan is not needing 30 seats, but we will have 30 seats, and I will fill the seats to the best of my ability. Just as an aside, I was doing this is handwritten, as you can tell. I promise to be brief, and I will. I projected 60 gallons of soup a week, with 8 portions coming from a gallon. That's 480 portions, pint portions, at $5 a portion, times 52 weeks a year. Just in the soup alone, I should be generating about $124,000 in revenue just on the soup, not to mention the beverage and the gourmet pastries and such. What supports all this is I'm told, and I go to church in Niles, but I'm told that St. John the Worker Parish has 3 Polish language masses a weekend, and I think that will come and provide for a stimulus for these sales. Of course, we will have other customers in the neighborhood, I hope, and I'm pretty confident we will. From
It's
what
actually
I can
St. Joseph. It's St. Joseph the Worker, and it's right over there.
St. Joseph the Worker.
You said St. John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I go to St. John.
Yeah.
We go to Our Lady of Ransom. I have all my churches mixed up. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Forgive me. I also am told that Wheeling and Niles has a similar demographic. So, if I can, and I will be also quick on this, I'd like to just run through the standards real quick. I know you have them, but I shortened them and I made them much to the point because I'm very excited about the food application. I went to chef school, and I really like to do that, and it should be fun. The first on the variation is the hardship. Honestly, the hardship belongs to the owner, not necessarily to me, although I'm impeached to be here for that hardship. He has owned this building for 5 years, since 2013, and two of the 3 spaces have been vacant for 5 years. So since 2013, they've been vacant. All efforts to lease, I'm told by him, have been muchly unsuccessful. It has great visibility on Dundee Road, not good for a neighborhood or village to have the vacancies on Dundee Road. I am a quality tenant. The owner desperately wants to have open on his property. The owner cannot increase the parking available at this time. And if I can just read into the record, this is from RMS Properties, the owner, the landlord. I am the landlord of 1201 Dundee Road, Unit B, and other in the village of Wheeling. I have owned the property for 5 years and have been trying unsuccessfully to rent units B and C for 5 years. I have tried very hard to attract a tenant, and now I have a chance for a quality tenant with a great reputation. I want to fill my tenant space for the financial viability of my property, but I also want to fill the space for the village of Wheeling. Many good things are happening in Wheeling, and it is a shame that storefronts, meaning his, I believe, along Dundee Road are not full. My existing tenant in the shopping center is a laundromat that is required to have 26 spaces. The 26 spaces are very seldom fully occupied. I believe that the laundromat and the Eagle Gourmet Cafe will share a number of customers and will reduce the parking needs for both businesses. He goes to talk about how excited he is. I'm sorry that I cannot attend your meeting tonight, but I implore you to please recommend approval for the special use and parking variation, and that's from RMS Properties. I'll give you a copy later. Moving on, another hardship is that the liquor code requires 30 seats, which I referenced earlier, for the restaurant with beer and wine. 30 seats require 10 parking spaces, so a typical restaurant is not possible at this location because of its size and footprint. We believe that this site is a good location for this cafe and worthy of a variation consideration. Hardship due to unique circumstances, frontage on Dundee Road, but property has no tenants who have been willing to lease the space. It is a relatively new center, built in 1994, well-maintained. Not sure what impediments to leasing is, except possibly the laundromat. We do not see the laundromat as an impediment for the cafe, the food operation, but instead it is a compatible use for our cafe. In any event, the owner sought to lease for 5 years unsuccessfully. Number 3, hardship not created by owner. Failure to rent is not caused by the owner. It is not due to ignored or deferred maintenance. It is a great location on Dundee Road. Ingress and egress are exceptional, and no reason why I can't rent, but it hasn't for 5 years. Property cannot yield reasonable return. The storefront in question has been vacant, again, I'm being redundant, for 5 years. The use of said storefront does not lend itself a professional office or a service office, as the center's anchor tenant is a laundromat. A limited menu cafe with gaming is probably the highest and best compatible use to a laundromat. Revenue to governments are enhanced with this proposed usage. If not approved, the space may go vacant still. Number 5, variation will not alter the character of the area. This cafe with its limited menu fits nicely into the character of this commercial intersection and this small center. The quality of the tenant may even help to attract the third tenant to the center. The facade will not be altered. Finally, number 6, on variations. The variation will not impair adequate supply of light, air, increase congestion in streets, endanger public safety, or diminish property values. The Eagle Gourmet Cafe is going into an existing tenant space. All of the above factors were protected when the center was first approved by the village in 1994. Nothing about the cafe will jeopardize those issues. If approved, the property value will be enhanced. If I can just go into the special use standards, if you will. Special use standard necessary for public convenience. Cafe will meet the market demand for Eastern European foods. Wheeling has a church nearby, which we talked about. There are a lot of people who have asked us to open another restaurant. By the way, we have a 5-year non-compete, so I couldn't do it any other place except 12 miles away. So we had quite a following back then, and they want to get those great foods that we cooked before. I believe that from the bottom of my heart. The special use will not alter the essential character of the area. This is the same standard answer in response to variation number 5, so I won't read that again. Number 3, how will location, size, nature, and intensity of the cafe be in harmony with and not impede orderly development? I am to be a tenant in an existing shopping center. I am planning a restaurant/cafe on a much smaller scale than that of a full kitchen restaurant. I have scaled this cafe to the location and size of his space, the space. There does presently exist other similar uses on Dundee Road. Filling this space will help complete the occupancy of the center, and that has had 2 to 3 tenant spaces vacant. Number 4, building walls, fences, landscape will not discourage development of adjacent properties. Answer, as indicated, this is an existing center that suffers from long-term vacancies. Filling the space will go a long way to support the other development in the area. No one likes to see vacancies. All of the existing facilities are in place. No exterior modifications are proposed. Almost done. Number 5, parking adequate and properly...
Sir, this is your petition, so you take as much time as you want. Seriously.
I'm very respectful to snow.
No.
For you.
That's true, too, but,
I'm good.
you know, we all live in a village, so this is your petition. So
Okay.
I want you to make sure that you state what you want to state.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. Number 5, is parking adequate and properly screened with exit drives laid out to avoid traffic hazards? The exit drives and screenings are all in place for this existing center. The question is only whether or not the parking is adequate. I have a great deal of experience in running restaurants, and I know that the existing parking is sufficient for this cafe. Otherwise, we would have chosen another location because I would lose customers. The owner of the property and I both believe that the peak hours of the laundromat and this cafe will be different yet compatible. The owner indicated in his letter that the laundromat seldom uses all 26 spaces allocated to it. I feel that the parking is more than sufficient for our use based on the parking usage for the existing laundromat together with our cafe and the third vacant space when it gets occupied. Number 6, property cannot yield reasonable return if special use is not granted. Again, being repetitive, it's been vacant for 5 years. The cafe with its limited menu fits nicely into the character of this commercial intersection and this small shopping mall. The return to the owner along with applicable fees and taxes to the government agencies will likely be better than reasonable. The quality of this tenancy may even help to attract the third tenant to the center. Finally, site plan review. We talked, but if I can just, there are no changes to the site plan other than what we agreed to with the health officer. We need to, in our architectural plans, allow for more storage space, and I get that. Parking as per case variation request will be adequate for our purpose. Site plan trash enclosure, we feel current trash enclosure is adequate size to handle our refuge. It is not a full-service restaurant, so we will not have the heavy refuge requirement of a full-service restaurant, nor the smell that may waft into the residential farther south. Lighting, no changes are proposed for the existing condition lightings. And a bicycle rack, which is called for, we will find an appropriate location with staff approval. And that concludes my report. So,
Thank you, sir.
I hope that was good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
We will ask you probably to definitely come up again, but this is a public hearing. So I have one person that I know wants to speak on this, and I will ask if anybody else wishes to speak on this matter. Mr. Stylen? Do you swear the testimony you give tonight to be the truth?
To the best of my ability, yes.
Thank you. And your name and address, sir?
Terry Stylen, 473 Briarwood Drive, Wheeling, Illinois.
Right.
I have some questions that maybe staff or the petitioner can answer. I don't expect answers right now. I'll just get them all out on the table. But it's my belief that the original occupant of the center, namely Laundry World itself, was given a variation for parking. And I seem to remember that in public testimony, when one of the commissioners asked Mr. Jennings how much parking was left over for any additional future tenants, and Mr. Jennings at that time replied, practically nothing. So if there's practically nothing left over, where are the parking spaces that a typical restaurant is going to need? We have the dental shop next door that, as you all know, has tandem parking because there aren't sufficient parking spaces in the dental office to park enough cars. So the dentist has to pull in and the office staff have to pull in, and then the patrons park behind the dentist. And the dentist can't leave until there are no patrons, but that's pretty good use of the facility. The office building to the rear of this site has had a lack of abundance of parking for many years. Walgreens across the street is doing pretty good, and its parking lot is pretty full. And as you all know, variations go on with the land and the property. So if this particular patron were to leave and another restaurant owner to come in, he could come in and change his food design and everything else and still have the 30 seats or 40 seats, whatever, that that this particular tenant says that he won't want to use. And the only reason that he's required to have the seating that he has is because he evidently wants to have a liquor license and gaming. So I would suggest that if he really wants to do a restaurant and eliminate the need for his variation and to reduce the number of seats that he has to a manageable number that he thinks he can handle, then maybe he ought to get rid of the requirement for liquor and gaming. I find it really interesting to have that. I have to have 40 seats because I want to serve liquor, and yet I don't want to use 40 seats and I don't need the parking for 40 seats because I don't think it's going to be that full. And then the question is, what happens to that third tenant that comes in? If this tenant is occupying all the reserve parking that exists on that site, then what happens to the third tenant that the petitioner or that the owner of the center hasn't been able to rent out? And my presumption is parking on that site has always been a difficult task, and that's probably the reason why it hasn't been rented for these many years. But what's going to happen to that third tenant? And I ask you to ask staff, if this parking variation is granted, how many parking spots are going to be available for the third tenant that hasn't come in? And what kind of business will be able to occupy that spot? Just as a last comment, personally, I think, and it's my impression, and that's why I answered am I going to speak the truth? Because I don't know if this is absolutely the truth, but I've heard a rumor that we have more gaming machines in our town per capita than any other suburban town in the Chicagoland area. And I don't think we need to perpetuate that, because I don't want my town to be known as the gaming establishment of the world. So, personal comment. Thank you very much. Appreciate any answers that you can find for me.
Thank you. Brooke, you can address it.
Yes, I can address the history of the parking on this property. Initially, there was a variation request with the Laundry World petition for, because they would not have had enough parking as the site was in its current state several years ago. However, they withdrew their petition and instead constructed these 10 parking stalls along Dundee Road. And so they no longer required a variation for parking.
Thank you. That's what I had thought. I was on, and so were you, and I didn't think there was a variation. They originally came in with a variation and then put that additional parking there, so
Yeah, I
thank
think
you.
they first talked about land banking then.
Right, yeah,
and then
exactly.
Came back and
Right.
redesigned it.
2013, I went to look to see if we had a packet on 2013. We've had these since only 14, so. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? Please come forward. And could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you give tonight to be the truth?
Yes.
And could you come closer and speak into that
Yes.
microphone and give your name and address?
Linda Larson, 24 Laurel Trail in Wheeling.
Thank you. You
what
have
I-
5 minutes.
Oh, I don't need that much time. As far as any issue about overflow parking, I live on Laurel Trail, and I don't see an issue with, may people just park on the residential street and walk there? Is that considered? I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, I'm just kind of here because I really want this restaurant open in my neighborhood. It'll be walking distance from my house. It'll be by the laundromat. I'm going to have work done in my home. So it'd be nice to have a restaurant walking distance, and to be honest, I'm half Polish too. I would like the food, but, so I just wanted just to show up here and just say I support the business, and if there's, anything any insight I can bring as far, because I live right there on the street. I don't think it would be an issue if some patrons were parking on the street and walked over to the restaurant. And that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this matter? No, thank you. So now, sir, if you want to come back up, we're going to have the commission ask questions, and I'm going to start with Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You did mention location of bike racks, so are you okay working with staff to select a position for that? Staff okay with that?
Yes, we'd be fine with that.
Okay. I did read in the packet, you said, and you mentioned that it wasn't going to be a lot, but you said it was stated there, I believe, it said much of the food sales will be through carryout sales. And I think in your testimony you said it wasn't that much. Can you tell me, like, what % of your sales do you expect to be carryout?
Initially, it's a very hard read, but I would say 5%.
Okay, that's fine. Do you feel gaming is necessary? Do you need that as a source of income in your proposed establishment?
I'm very confident of my abilities as a restaurateur.
I don't deny that.
So just, we're approving a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and I'm not certain that gaming is.
Right, gaming is regulated by the state. They'd have to get, any gaming would be subject to state license and then the village liquor license procedure. So it's not part of the special use.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
But for clarification, the village code is you need a minimum number of seats to have gaming, correct?
Gaming is only allowed with certain liquor licenses. One of them is a restaurant that has, Class B license, which I believe has a minimum of 30 seats.
So a minimum of 30 seats.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I asked that
No,
question.
actually.
No, it's okay.
You asked the right question, but you reversed it a little bit. It's the 30 seats is required to have gaming. Okay, so.
It's also part of the restaurant liquor license.
Restaurant
too,
liquor
not just
license, right.
gaming, so it's
Right.
more than one.
Okay. This is more of a question. I kind of was hoping that the owner of the building was here. Every time I go by there, it seems like there's and this is probably for staff, is there something that we can do to get a hold of them? Because the park, every time I go by there at night, the lights are never on in the parking lot. It's like it's like they should come on, and it's like it's pitch black in there. Is there something that we can do to at least to get the lights on and operable?
They come on later.
I'm sorry, what?
They come on much later than they
Okay,
should.
so they probably did
And
not
stay on
accommodate
much
the
later.
time shift in the winter. It's just, all year round, and maybe at the same time?
Yeah, I think there was a power failure and their timer got thrown off.
We can definitely
And
work with the property owner on that.
May I say, if I'm granted this special use and variation, and I'm located in there, the lights will be on, because.
Oh, and I don't
it's good.
deny, and I know that's not your fault, but
No,
it's something I feel
but
needs
what
to
I'm
be
trying to be
addressed.
clear on is that they're not on, but they will be on, and they're not on now is because the owner of the property has the laundromat, and so he's not probably all that in tune to the lights. See, if the laundromat was owned by somebody else, they'd be nagging the owner to turn the lights on. I mean, that's logical, right?
But if it's crowded and it's at night and they're parking around the corner, you know, like where you could possibly be located, that could be a safety issue. So
I will
just
make
ask
sure
to
the
be
lights are
located. No, no problem. Right now, I think that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Dorband.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out, you want the additional seating so that you can have the gaming, correct? Is that?
In a matter of speaking, that's correct.
Okay.
I can use the extra seating, there's no question. But really, I mean, I don't know if I'm going against the process here, the village attorney.
No, you can still.
The gaming is an insurance policy. I'm investing with my wife $100,000 in this project, and even though I'm confident of my acumen in restaurants, I'm 66 years old, and I need the insurance of the games. I mean, I think that's reasonable. Would I do it without the games? I'd have to think long and hard on it, because, you know, there's no more failures in business, startup businesses, than restaurants. They come and they fail. And it could happen to me, and I would be stuck with a 5-year lease and loss of $100,000. So the games just provide that extra margin. I hope that answers your question.
It did. You stated earlier that you thought that only 5% of your business would come from carryout.
Initially.
Initially. Oh, okay. So I mean, because I kind of see it differently. I kind of see it at a higher rate, but.
I hope so.
So, I mean, based just on the soup. I think that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kalis.
Thank you, Chairman. I, like the resident who took off, I would prefer to see somebody in there. It has been vacant far too long, so I appreciate you making the request. And I like the idea of a restaurant. Have you, and I appreciate that you've talked to the owner of the laundromat. You said the owner of the laundromat is the owner of the property. Is that true? Have you discussed with him, has there been any, like we do traffic studies with every new thing, has there been a parking study? Does he know definitively how many people are maxed out? Like, what's the max number of parking that has ever happened at the laundromat? You have 26 stalls there. Has that ever, do you know if it's ever maxed out? Is it 50% vacant? Because
He led me to believe that what he's required to have has never, ever been an issue. And the times that I've been there, now they usually been during the daytime, I've never seen in the lot more than 6, 7 cars.
Right.
So that's why I'm pretty cool with the variation.
Yeah, it would have been nice for him to be like, the most we've ever had is 10. It would have been nice to know, because I drive by it all the time, and I also don't see it maxed out. So just because you are only allotted 11 spots doesn't mean there won't be more spots available. But I was just curious if there was ever a definitive number of that, because that would help. Because 26 stalls for a laundromat is probably more than they need, but again, that's just a maybe. So, I mean, I appreciate your credentials and your experience. I think that your experience and the world-classness of your soup, even though I don't like mushrooms, is kind of goes to your detriment. If you get too many people in there coming for the soup, then you have a parking challenge. So it's a strange dilemma you have there. But I would love to see something in there. And it's hard to tell. It's just it's tough, because it's like it's a maybe possibly issue. But so thank you for letting me know about the laundromat parking that you're not sure on. If you could find out if they know definitively, that would be helpful. But And I was also curious about the percentage of like you, in the packet, I read that you were talking about maybe not focusing on carryout, but that could alleviate the problem. So I was surprised to hear 5% is your estimate, because if you're counting on the carryout, which I think you could if someone just grabs soup and takes off versus sitting there, that could alleviate the parking problem, but you're not counting on that. 95% is going to be dine-in. Is that the assumption?
Right off the get-go, I think that's probably going to be what it is. I assume, based on the $250,000 that we used to sell yearly at the White Eagle, that it would be more than 5%. It could go up to 25 to 30%.
So the comparison to the former banquet hall that you sold is not entirely, like, the capacity of that restaurant, we can't compare to the new.
Oh, no.
Right, because it's a totally different thing. It's a
You
restaurant.
haven't been to Shabillo's, have you?
I've never been there, no. I told you I don't like mushrooms. Yeah.
Then you have
You're
no
reminding
comparison.
me, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yes, yeah, it's huge.
The
Okay.
banquet facility.
It's a banquet facility,
It's
yeah.
huge.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, important. So it's just, you've got fans, as it were, that are going to know about this. I mean, if you have a name for yourself, and apparently you do, I'm sorry, I have not partaken. I've never been
You're young.
invited.
You're
So I am a little bit younger.
You
So I'm
don't
just-
go to enough funerals, is it?
That's true.
Thank God for that. So I'm just trying to get a grasp on what the popular, like, if you're immensely popular, that's the problem, right? Like, you have too much parking. There's nothing, the Laurel Trail concept, parking on Laurel Trail, there's no problem. That street parking is legal over there, right? If he were to,
Well,
I'm not certain if it's allowed, but
Okay.
it's not encouraged by our
Right.
zoning code.
okay, that's what I was, like, hey, you can't
It-
park here, so go park
It
over
may
there.
be permitted during daytime hours,
Okay,
but it's certainly not encouraged by our zoning code.
okay, that was a question I had that I didn't realize I had, so. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Commissioner Kalis. You had to grow up in the city to understand Shabillo's.
Okay.
And the
I'll ask my dad about it.
long standing that they've had in the city of Chicago for years and years and
Okay.
years. Yeah. Growing up, I think I even remember the one that was way in the city, so, and I'm pretty old. So, Commissioner Blanova.
Thank you. I understand the gaming part. While they're doing laundry, they will have time, and that it's not going to be a problem. They will be playing there and, eating. But during the summertime, there is a big possibility of a problem with the parking lot. But if they can park on the street, then they will work out. I'm pretty sure that the soup will be more popular during the winter time.
Very likely.
So during the summertime, laundry they usually busy.
Right.
So I think it will work out. I don't have any other concerns, thank you.
It's a good problem to have, but it's a double-edged sword.
Commissioner Creech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing. All my questions have been asked. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Okay, some of mine have been answered. I have the unique distinction on this panel of being the house directly across the street. I am on the other side of Dundee Road and have 7 windows that look right on this store. So, there have been as many as 30 cars in that lot. I'm not an official traffic study person, but I, for one, was always amazed at how much traffic that laundromat did generate once we had it built there. It was not what I expected. So it does get that high. It's not often. It probably does average 8 to 10 cars, if I had to take a guess. The parking lot gets very busy. On Sunday mornings, I think, is probably their heaviest, and it's like family day at the laundromat, because in the nice weather, kids are out there playing in it and everything else, so traffic is a bit of a safety problem there. The The hours you're talking about, going till midnight, the laundromat's been a good neighbor. By 10 o'clock, they're done. Everything's quiet. So I have a problem with the 12 o'clock, especially if it's a restaurant versus a gaming cafe. And that's what I see when I look at the floor plan. So you answered that one. Is that garage space currently being used for anything? Does anybody know?
I don't know, sir.
I don't know either.
I mean, we counted in for parking and don't know if anything is
It could
actually
be
being
asked
done
of
in
the
there.
property owner if perhaps the laundromat uses it for its employees or would be open to using
Yeah,
it.
I've
for
never
its
seen
employees.
any activity, that
Right, I
make it
don't
look
know
like they
how
go
it's
in and out.
used.
We might want to look into that. I mean, because we're using those numbers in the count.
Yes.
And let's see, go back to what someone else said about what does that leave for that third potential tenant, and it's only 4 spaces. That really puts a severe limit on what could possibly go in there. On the staff report, there was also a question about the trash capacity. Is there large enough to handle yours plus everybody else's?
My evaluation on the trash, because we're vending the food in, most of the food, not all, but most of the food is vended in, prepared, you won't have different products that generate the trash. So it'll be a simple package that the food will come in, particularly the soup, and that doesn't require the same kind of volume of trash that if I had a full kitchen, if I have to take the back store and build out a full kitchen, then the trash would need to be expanded or compartmentalized or made it more efficient. But right now, it is sufficient to our needs.
Did I see a dishwasher on that?
No.
So you're using disposable plates,
Yes,
which,
but some of the disposable today are very, very nice.
yeah, but it's still, if you're talking the volume that you are, that's a lot of trash.
Like I say, if push comes to shove, we can put in a compactor and reduce the volume.
Okay. All right, then there is that question, you stated starting out, maybe only 5% carryout, yet in the standard response that you gave, you mentioned largely carryout, so I'm confused as to.
I know there's a contradiction, but this has been a process, and I've come to believe that initially it will be 5%, but that it will grow. To what extent, I'm not sure, I'm not confident, but I believe the 5% is a solid number, and the high number could be as much as 30% in time.
And probably the last item, I know we've brought it up at other cafe things, the smoking area.
There's no, I want no smoking area.
No, it won't be inside,
Yeah.
but we usually are looking for something outside that has to be designated.
It's going to be so many feet from the door.
15 Wow, feet. That's going to be interesting. Probably
right by that.
Right.
Yeah.
right there. I mean, the signage is going to have to be, there's going to have to be signage for that, what is it, 15 feet from the entrance?
Right.
But if, it's great if nobody goes into C, but if somebody occupies C, then and you can't go around the corner, it'd be interesting. Well, you probably could go around the corner. But I think we need to ensure that there's signage for smoking areas.
You mean just the 15 feet
Yeah.
in the door? That would be done at permit per the building code.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's standard as part of the permitting occupancy
All right.
process.
And I think the last question I have is for staff, and it goes back to the gaming part of it. Is there not a regulation to screen the machines from outside? Because we have no highly visible ones in town that I
So
can think of.
that is, again, through the Illinois State Gaming Board. They have regulations on screening and barricades from people who aren't, who are under 21. So that would be all done through that licensing process.
But what about from the outside? Because in this position, this is what I'm going to look out at.
If it's necessary, and they have to put something to cover the windows, they wouldn't have to return to the Plan Commission
Okay.
for appearance approval.
All right.
And I'll go on record right now that we will have a shade there that will let a semblance of light in, but not show the games. And I think on the floor plan, it doesn't show a half wall.
No, it doesn't.
It will be done. There will be a half wall separating the machines from the seating area,
Okay.
and it will be restricted to 21. And you won't see, I can't say you won't see any of the light from the machine, but it will be very, very minimal.
All right, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. So, you said could you again state your peak hours and the laundromat peak hours from your notes?
Okay, let me find that. So the Eagle Gourmet will be from 7 a.m., I'm sorry, that's all the hours. Peak hours are from 11 p.m. to 1 p.m. and the peak hours for the restaurant
Right.
is 11 a.m., sorry.
Okay.
That's why I bring my wife, she corrects me all the time.
Because I
11
thought you
a.m.
had said 11 p.m. to 1 a.m.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay,
11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
okay.
And I was told by staff at the property owner, the peak hours weekdays are mid to late afternoon, and then evenings approximately 7 on. In other words, they eat and then they may do their laundry. And on weekends, it's a dispersion on Saturday and Sunday most of the time that it's open. There's no peak on the weekend. And then what else?
No, that was it, because there is overlap in your evening hours of, you said evenings in your 5 to 8, but you're open till midnight, so, okay, I just needed that clarification. So, and this is probably for staff, and Mr. Shabella, you might know this answer. In order for this to not require a permit, how many seats would?
Not require a
Yeah, a variation, I'm sorry, not a permit, a variation. What is that number?
I might have to,
But then the reality
and look
is
at this a little
then you
closer.
don't have
it would be less than 30 seats.
it would be less than 30, you need 30 for the gaming.
The liquor gaming license.
The liquor gaming license, which is, from what I'm hearing is as you indicated, Mr. Shabilla, that it's your insurance, and I understand that, but I have a concern about the parking. I drive by that all the time, and it seems like there's always cars there, and then to add an additional traffic to that area, and I know that it will fill a space, but the the intensity, that type of traffic, is not, it's not conducive to that. And I understand this is a hardship, but this hardship was brought on by the owner, by putting that in there and expecting these variations to occur for future things. And now we have a spot that's got 4 parking spots. I don't know too many retail places that, unless you cater to kids that can ride their bikes there, that you're going to be able to have a spot with just 4 parking spaces. So they're going to have to come in for a variation. I wish the owner would have thought broadly when he was doing that and considered other avenues, but now we're in a spot where we have to, in order to fill these, they're saying it's a hardship, and the owner is saying it's a hardship. And and to me, he created this hardship. We didn't. He did it by doing this. He did it by putting that, adding that, and it's a moneymaker. And as Commissioner Johnson said, and I've said, and there's always cars there. And I just think adding this additional traffic is not traffic and parking. And as much as the one resident said, well, they can park on Laurel, that's not what we encourage in the village. It's not what we encourage in the village at all. That's why we have parking spaces, and that's why we have parking lots. That truly isn't, as you well know, living in the city or on the northwest side, and there's a restaurant on Northwest Highway that I'll occasionally go to, that the only place you park it is on the streets, and it aggravates the residents. And she might like it, and that family might like it, but the overall neighbors probably wouldn't like that. It's a good idea. That's me speaking, and I'm only one of 7 here. So, but I personally just think that the parking is going to be an issue, even with the variation, asking for the variation. 18 seats, that's, a variation of 7 is quite a bit. It's quite a bit.
May I respond?
Oh, sure, of course.
I understand where you're coming from and what you're saying. You know better than I of the parking situation there. And it is truly an owner's hardship, the person who did this, and maybe he'll pay the price when he tries to rent out the last space. The impact upon my operation will be, if there is no parking, I will presumably lose business. But my business plan works with 16 seats, so I will survive with losing a certain amount of required parking spots for the 30 restaurant seats. So again, if they come in and there's no parking, they will have to go. If they begin to park on the street, I suspect that the neighbors would begin a petition to restrict the parking. I mean, that could happen too. But again, it's conjecture on my part, but I'm willing to make the investment, and I'm willing to say to myself that I could live with the restricted parking, and if it's not enough, then I will lose that amount of business. I won't go out of business because of it, but I will just lose that amount that cannot park. And then your second swing at the ball will be when that third space comes available or comes before you, and then you've really got a hardship.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but again, I think it could work for me. I mean, I believe it can. I may not do the kind of business that I would want to do, but I will not fail because of a few lesser people parking.
Thank you. Do variations and special uses expire? Do variations expire?
They usually, this one is a specific variation that runs with this use. for the required parking for a restaurant, so it would depend on what came in. If it was another restaurant, it probably would have variation unless we.
You could speak into the microphone.
Sorry. This is a variation specifically for a restaurant. So it does variations run with the land.
Is it contingent upon the liquor and gaming thing as well? Like if a restaurant came in not with liquor and gaming,
Oh,
it would
no,
expire?
that's specific to each actual tenant
Okay.
in use.
Okay.
But how the variation for parking is tied to the specific number of seats proposed. So if a different restaurant came in with far more seats, that the variation wouldn't apply. Because it's for this specific number. It would be a very unique circumstance for it to actually continue past this user.
Chairman, if I could give you an example, it just occurred to me. At the White Eagle, which you know and some of you know, the building was 65,000 square feet and it sat on 5 acres of land. And there were times, well, not since 2008, but prior to 2008, where 7 of the banquet halls could be filled up. We had 804 spots. They weren't all prime spots, but we had 804. We could have gotten filled up almost to 804. There could have been maybe 50 non-prime, and our restaurant, which we had a restaurant, people would come into the parking lot and leave. Invariably, the restaurant on days where we had 7 banquets, the restaurant did very little. And that's what I would assume would happen to this property if the parking does not work, presumably. But again, it's conjecture, and I take my hat off to you because you know, you live there. But if people go away like they did at the White Eagle, I'm sorry that they did go away, but it was something we had to live with. God bless, we had 7 banquets.
Right, exactly.
So it's the same thing here. I could survive with not filling every one of those chairs.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No?
Thinking.
I know, you brought the microphone down, I'm ready.
You can hear it, right? Hear the grinding? You know, I've sat on this board for a long time, and I was here when the dental office that's just down the way from you came before us. And there was a great deal of concern about the parking and the tandem parking that's there and how they use it. And at that time, we agreed that it would be to their deficit, obviously, that they couldn't get their patients in there. So in this particular case, what you said is correct. It's the same kind of thing, that if people are not going to find a parking space, they're going to go away. And that's obviously not what you want.
No.
Okay? The other piece of this is I'm listening to all this, that third place, that third tenant has not been utilized, nor may it. And to my way of thinking, you are going to do well enough that you're going to end up taking over that third spot. So if it hasn't been rented in 5 years, I don't know what makes me think that it's going to be rented overnight. So I guess my gut feeling is that I would rather give you the variation for the parking with the anticipation that you would take over that third tenant spot.
I would hope. Thank you.
That's just.
Thank you. So if there are no more questions, we have 2 items. 2018 1A, do we have any conditions on either the special use?
Yes, I have.
On the special use?
Yes, on the special use, there was one from the staff report that's been adjusted slightly. It is that a bicycle rack shall be installed on the site in a location agreed upon by staff and the owner. And the second one was not in the staff report, but it was advised by Attorney Maluzzi that the gaming aspect of the special use shall be subject to all village and state licenses.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. So Docket number 2018-1A, zoning variation to reduce the required parking for a restaurant. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Dorban, second by Commissioner Creech. Mr. Secretary.
Commissioner Dorban?
Yes.
Commissioner Creech?
Yes.
Commissioner Blanova?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Kalis?
Yes.
Commissioner Powers vote yes, and Chairman Rafato.
No. 2018-1B, special use site plan approval for a sit-down restaurant.
So
Oh,
moved.
wait, hold on one second.
Sorry.
That was a little too fast for you, huh?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I will slow down. I was going 1X, and I should have just gone 1.
Okay. Okay, I'm ready. Thank you.
And that motion passed. 2018-1B, special use site plan approval for a sit-down restaurant with the conditions mentioned.
Motion.
Second.
Right? A motion by Commissioner, was that a sort of
Motion
tentative
approved.
there?
Motion approved.
Commissioner, okay. Motion by Commissioner Powers, second by Commissioner Dorban. Mr. Secretary.
Commissioner Powers vote yes. Commissioner Dorban?
Yes.
Commissioner Blanova?
Yes.
Commissioner Creech?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Kalis?
Yes.
Chairman Rafato.
No. Motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You'll have something to sign, and then I think Brooke will get a hold of you when you have to go before the village board. Sure.
I thank you, and if this goes forth, as I assume it will, I will be a very, very good corporate neighbor. I will participate in everything and anything Wheeling has to offer. Thank you.
I don't doubt that, Mr. Shabillo, based upon your reputation at White Eagle for all of those years, you and your family. I don't doubt that at all.
Thank you, Chairman.
And you'll have something to sign. And it's just, yes, it's just what the vote was and the conditions on the special use. Oh, I'm not going to touch these. Not touching them.
You could start.
You sure?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more question?
Sure.
Before you leave, may I ask what your timetable is? To come to the,
I would hope to be open by mid to late April.
thank you.
Thank you.
Quick.
Do you want to just say that to him? Okay, sir, if you can just, Mr. Shabillo, if you can come up here and sign these 4 things. There.
So usually we try to do any special use in conjunction with the liquor license application. So you've already met with Martin, I think, so you probably want to just coordinate with him so they can be on the same.
I see your little bumper came off too.
Oh, this one? Where?
That
Where's it supposed to go? Oh,
back here somewhere.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
That happens to mine too. It kind of like sticks
And,
to it.
and you will get
Need some super beers.
One of even noticed.
B. Those are for you, sir, for your records. Thank you. Can we take a 5-minute? Last petitioners, I'm sorry, but we've been sitting up here. We're going to take a 5-minute break.
18.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Calling docket number 2018-2. Oops,
Please silence your phones.
that was 5 minutes. That was pretty good. Docket number 2018-2. Uptown 500, 501 West Dundee. Address to be changed to 500 West Dundee. Amendment to the planned unit development to allow for an additional story on the mixed-use retail and residential building. Mr. Secretary.
Docket number 2018-2, Daniel Resco, applicant on behalf of Uptown 500 LLC owner, is seeking an amendment to ordinance number 5126, which granted final plan unit development approval of a mixed-use retail and multifamily residential development at 501 West Dundee Road, which is approximately 7.65 acres at the northwest corner of Dundee Road and Northgate Parkway. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Brooke, anything to add?
I would like to state that the staff reports and submittal of the petitioner are part of the public record.
Thank you. And the petitioners, please come forward. Whoever's speaking. This isn't a public hearing. Yes, it is. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Whoever's going to speak, could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you give tonight to be the truth? Yes. Great, thank you. And when you come up to speak, just give your name and business address. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll dive right in.
Yep, dive right in.
I'm Joe Mashek, BSB Design. We're at 1540 West Dundee Road in Palatine, Illinois. I don't have any business cards. We're here tonight to request an amendment to the previously approved PUD plan for Uptown 500, previously 501. Fortunately, we don't need an amendment to get the name changed. So, anyhow, what we're here tonight is it's actually a very important request for us because what we've wanted to do all along is create a really high quality development for this corner with a sky bridge, a multi-floored amenity space, a courtyard with swimming pool and all the other appointments, as well as helping to improve the traffic situation at that corner by adding turn lanes. So there would be 2 right turn lanes going westbound from Northgate onto Dundee, and a decel XL lane, a decel lane on the north side of Dundee Road. Those are all still in place. They're very costly items. One of the important components of, here I go again. The team itself is in place, and we want to continue our good relationship with staff. We've worked very closely with Brooke and Andrew and John and their team. I think we've come up with some really good solutions to some of the issues that have come our way. The amendment to the PUD would be to allow a 6-story building, and what was previously approved was a 5-story building. 59 additional units on that 6th story, 20 additional parking spaces, and reducing the retail from 12,000 square feet to 10,500 square feet. Now, why are we asking for this additional? What's happened is that we are the third in the door for a very successful TIF and development district. So what we're anticipating with assistance isn't as much as we initially had anticipated. So we sat down with our team and staff and looked at ways that we could essentially create a more efficient building. So what happened was we started to look at it, and we quickly realized that the importance of this corner, the importance of this building to the town center, and essentially the high quality details and everything else was very, very important to both us and staff, and we knew it would be important to you guys. So to proceed, what we're asking for is additional units so that we can spread that cost out over additional units. Since we're not getting the assistance we initially planned for within the TIF, this is a really good way to continue to design and create a really high-quality building, which includes the two-story sky bridge, the amenity spaces on both the Dundee roadside, as well as the 3- and 4-story amenity space in the center of the project, and the pool and everything else in the courtyard. So, with those reasons, we wanted to stay on course and spread out the costs over additional units. So, and I'll get this right one of these days. But anyhow, the site plan essentially remains the same. Access points are the same. Parking spaces are all the same. Service area, fire access, everything remains the same. What we're doing is adding a 6-story to the areas around the courtyard up to the lobby space, above the lobby space. Initially, we had a 5-story building. Building coverage, pavement coverage, open space, all remains the same on the amended plan. However, within the residential component, we initially had 262 units approved. What we're asking for is an additional 59 units, bringing that to 321 units. All the same size, all the same design from what you had seen previously, just adding additional units. We initially had 441 parking spaces for the residential. That came up to about 1.67 parking spaces per unit. What we're asking for is 476 parking spaces, 444 of those in the garage, 32 on the surface, which comes up to 1.48 spaces per unit. And I'll get into some of the details of that in a moment. The retail, initially, as I had mentioned, we were at 12,000 square feet, 113 parking spaces. We're now at 10,500 square feet and 98 spaces. So we went from 9.4 spaces per 1,000 square feet to 9.3 spaces. Both of those numbers are right in there with industry standards for restaurants. But as you'll see in how we've designed the restaurant, the retail space, there is some flexibility. The elements that could be affected by this additional units, actually the traffic is very minimally affected. It's essentially 0.5% increase or less than 0.5% increase. The change in density, and this is from Louis Abuna, our traffic consultant with KLOA. The change in density will result in an increase in in-site traffic of approximately 15%. This translates to approximately 30 trips in and out during the peak hours, meaning 1 trip every 2 minutes. Of that traffic, approximately 20 trips will travel through the intersection of Dundee and Northgate Parkway. And when compared to the projected traffic that will travel through this intersection, this increase will amount to less than 0.5%. This minimal increase will not result in any changes to the overall operations of the intersection and will not require any additional improvements and/or modifications beyond what was already identified and approved in the initial plan. Those improvements include the additional right turn lane going westbound that I had mentioned from Northgate Parkway to Dundee Road, and an additional lane on the north side of Dundee towards Northgate Parkway, which is essentially an acceleration lane. The proposed access will continue to be adequate and to accommodate the site traffic and will ensure that the additional traffic is efficiently dispersed. The parking is the other issue that we've anticipated that would be a question. We've initially started for the residential component, 1.67 spaces per unit. We're now at 1.48 spaces per unit. So what we did is we did an analysis of other very similar projects in the suburban area, mostly the western suburbs, but then also Glenview in the as a northwest suburb, and Orland Park, which is also a transit-oriented development on the southwest suburb. So Burlington Station is a project that we were involved in with BSB. It's in downtown Downers Grove, a little bit more of an urbanized location than we are, but it's about a similar distance to the train. That is parked at 1 stall per unit. So it's 89, it's approximately, there's some disabled spaces as well. Residents at the Grove, in Downers Grove, is 1.17 spaces per unit. Amley and Evanston, again, that's another urban location, very similar to ours as far as the distance to the metro station, a little bit farther actually. It's 1.46 stalls per unit. The Reserve, which we've talked about previously during the other approval process, that's at Gulf Road and Waukegan Road in Glenview. That's parked at 1.39 stalls per unit, adjacent to the the Gulf Metro Station. And Orland Park, about 1-to-1. Wheaton in downtown Wheaton is 1.3 per unit. Now, the reason why we're kind of using cold hard facts here, I've got some anecdotal information based on leasing agents at the Reserve at Glenview and Burlington Station and Downers Grove. And the reason why I just want to say that it's anecdotal, it's based on observation. It's kind of your observation with the laundromat. It's, you know, it's not scientific at all. However, it is important. The Reserve at the Glenview is their parking garage is about half empty. Now, why is that? It could be any number of things. Again, and that's the leasing manager. I don't want to put a lot of weight on it because they want to sell units and they'll paint a rosy picture on it. So I just wanted to say that. However, what she had found and what we've seen in developments like this is that it's either a move down buyer that's sold their home looking for another place, may have one car looking for, you know, maybe it's a divorcee or a widower. They have one car, they want a 2-bedroom apartment. So that's the Glenview model. That's what we had found out there. Some of the other models like Wheaton, downtown and Burlington Station, those are younger renters. They don't want a car. In the case of Burlington Station, they have 3 spaces that are set aside for car share program, which is the IGO and the enterprise one. It's not IGO anymore. It's Zipcar. I think Zipcar is the. Anyways, yeah, and Uber, but. Anyhow, the car share program is much more important to the younger renters. So with that, we are very, very comfortable with the 1.48 stalls per unit, probably anticipating it being a little bit overparked given the amount of studio 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms that we have on the project. The appraisal research had done a market study. We had Gail Lisner at the beginning take a look at what this site can handle. It's very important to us that we hit the market just right because this is a big investment not only for us, but it's also going to be a legacy for you guys. So we want to make sure that if we're adding additional units, are we going to be able to hit the market right? Yes, we are still anticipating that there is a big need in the northwest suburbs for additional units. The other thing that we're excited about is exactly what we saw earlier tonight with the theater and the activity that you're getting across the street and the vibe that is starting to be created here in downtown Wheeling. I think we can start calling it that. Initially, when we first came in as a concept level, we had 265 units, a lot of smaller units. There were some concerns, so we reduced the size of some of or increased the size of some of the units, came up with 262 units, and now we're up to 321 units. The 321 units are all using the larger floor plans that you had seen and approved in the last plan. The retail component was the other concern that we started, I think, at around 13,000 square feet. We went to 12,000, and now we're at 10.5. The space actually is about the same size, but if you'll notice on what was approved, we had we have a double corridor for just ease of removing trash and taking deliveries and things like that. That's now out of the equation. Plus our loading and delivery area on the courtyard side is actually made a little bit, it's a little bit wider, a little bit squatter, but by taking this space out of the essentially leasable and serviceable area within the retail is now 10,500 square feet. So what we did was we took a polyline of the area that's leasable, and that's 10,500 square feet. You can see there's some minor differences in the way that this is all laid out over here, and that was really because of the way the courtyard functions and the entrance drive functions. Getting to the parking spaces for the retail. What you see here is a potential to have the retail separated into up to 4 spaces. We initially had 5 spaces. We took a look at it and talked to several users. 4 spaces seemed to be a lot more reasonable, just with the layout and the way everything kind of knit together. If this were to, in an ideal world, go into several pieces of this as a restaurant, if the whole thing came into a restaurant, we're parked at about what a Darden Chili's or the Italian one. Olive Garden, thank you. Those like they typically ask for 9.2 to 9.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Granted, those are a little different animal than this location since we're integrated into a residential building. Typically, those are standalone. But the 9.4 per 1,000 is based on using the whole thing as potentially a restaurant. If pieces of this were to pop out, the standard, as Brooke has in her report, that if 5.5 stalls per 1,000 would be recommended for if, say, there's a wine shop or something like a carry-out that would service the residential building. So we're comfortable there as well, but need to lay that out. Now, the building, this is really where we really started this is where the whole process started, because what's approved is on the bottom of the screen. That was the 5-story elevation. A lot of masonry, a lot of cementitious or the fiber concrete, the fiber cement board, and different hardy type of systems. You can see by adding the 6th floor, it actually, in my opinion, makes a much better profile, particularly at the key intersection of Northgate and Dundee Road. So what we've done is continued the existing materials that were originally proposed, pulled them up, created areas of these cementitious panels. We had initially called an Equitone panel out, but we're using a very similar system, which is called the Hardy system, which is the same material. It's a different manufacturer. The other elements that I liked is that the way the parking and the parking deck and the parapets are actually hidden because of the 6th floor. The east elevation, Northgate Parkway, again, the 6th floor at the key corner, I think really adds additional just depth and weight, which I think is really important. Materials, all very similar, cementitious panel, brick bands, lap siding bands, and a variation of materials and colors. We took these, since we're adding a floor, we were concerned about some of these areas being flat. So we varied the color of the material and created bands to break up the mass. Now, another thing that we did was, as you see on the original approved elevation, we had casement windows which are very vertical. So adding another floor, we were concerned about the verticality of the windows, and by using a single hung window like we've done, not only do we kind of bring that mass a little bit down, but it also saves us a little bit of money. So just to be perfectly upfront, the reason why we're here is to try to spread the costs over a greater area so that we can continue to have the glass panels, the glass spandrels, and aluminum retail frontage on the sky bridge. We've got the walkway across the top. We also have aluminum sunscreens along the top, again, to break up the elevation and add more interest. On top of the corner balcony bays, we still have the tower elements. So we've really taken the design, and instead of taking from it, we've actually added to it, in my opinion. North elevation is 6-story. Again, you can see the way the garage works with the elevation. Works well. Same bands of materials and screens for all of the roof equipment. Now, the courtyard, we actually took another approach, and this was an area that we really thought a lot about. By adding another floor, there was a concern early on by a couple of the commissioners about what the sunlight was. When we set out, I was concerned about that in the original design, and that's why we expanded it and kept one side open with the sky bridge, was to make sure that there was light and air in there. So by adding another floor, we felt like going with the vertical bands of masonry, it just started to appear kind of heavy. So what we did was we put the lighter cementitious, we used the same materials, but we broke it up in a more horizontal fashion, where at the pedestrian or the strike zone is all brick. Then above that, where the light can hit it and reflect off into the courtyard, we've got the lighter cementitious panels, the hardy panels. The west elevation, interesting because it's actually what we've done, what we had approved was actually a little bit of a mistake, I hate to say. We had an additional floor on the elevation, but not in the plans. So actually what's happening here is that our garage elevation actually works better with the sixth floor added. Now what you see here with this band here, that's actually, it's a little deceiving, because that's actually about 125 feet back from the front edge of the garage. So as you're driving by on a train, or if a redevelopment happens in the shopping center across the tracks on the other side, it's going to be, you're going to have to really crane your neck to see that elevation. Still have the planters and the greenery along the west elevation as well. Engineering, I included these because this was another aspect of the project and why we're asking for additional units. The storm sewers that we're working with staff through is a very costly item, and the increment and the relief from the TIF is not as much as we initially thought. The traffic plan remains the same. The additional lane I was speaking of is right here, and the additional lane along Dundee Road is right here. So with that, that's about what I've got to present. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, So I'm going to back it up to one of the elevations, and if anyone has anything to add, we're here for whatever you got.
Well, this, excuse me, this is a public hearing, so I need to ask if there's anybody that wishes to speak on this matter. Okay. So, we'll start with Commissioner Creech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. So when you were mentioning this west elevation above the parking garage,
Yes.
you're pointing out that top element with the double hung or the single hung windows. What actually is that?
This is the hallway along the inside hallway of the western
Of
part
the top
building.
floor?
Yes.
Now, do you have windows in all the hallways throughout that parking garage structure?
No, just along the top floor where there's light.
Okay, so that particular element, is that the cementous board panels, or is that part of the precast of the garage?
That's part of the building, so it would be the panel.
So it would be the cement panels?
Yes.
So it would be colored?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Well, I am concerned, of course, about the additional density of this project. And I know the last time you provided the great illustration of the sun shading, and I'd be interested to see how this got affected, because there are going to be days when it looks like you're not going to see any sun in there with that additional floor. Be that as it may, overall, it still looks good. I think the elevations in the courtyard could be a little more attractive somehow. I don't have any ideas for you, but yeah, that doesn't excite me. Do you have a view of what it was before?
Not of the courtyard.
It's on ours.
I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brooke does. It's hard to go back.
Excellent. Thank you, Brooke.
Here.
There's the courtyard right there.
Okay. Yeah, I still think that looks better. That's really all I have
Well, but
right now.
just to, Commissioner Johnson, you brought us something. This, I mean, what you showed us is nothing that was in our packet. I mean, these are the courtyards. These show the balconies and everything. Yours doesn't, right? I mean, that last thing that you showed just is displaying the facade. So this right here, this is the previous elevation. Now, can we go back to what's in our packet for that?
This is what was in your packet.
This is
What
the old
elevation
one.
are you looking for?
This is the old one.
The new elevation.
The new
Here.
elevation.
There, yeah.
So that's the new elevation.
Yes.
This doesn't look as stark as what.
True.
As what
you showed,
It's what you
yes.
showed. I mean, what you're showing is pretty stark.
If I can jump in, I don't like the 3D modeling program that we've used. What we've shown is, it's just, what's really good for is to show how the mass works. It's too photorealistic, but it's not enough. It's an interesting dilemma. I don't know if, and you'll probably see it, and you've seen it with others, I'm sure. We can dress it up like we can with sky and planes and people walking around, people with balloons. That image did not have that, and that's, it's a trick that we use.
I also have to say, Joe had this
If you could
Microphone.
use that microphone there.
Joe initially had, I'll speak loudly. Joe initially had these images in the presentation. I said, I thought the other image that you all don't like looked better, so we replaced that. My mistake, just one.
We use tricks, and whenever you see children with balloons, those balloons cover things up.
Good to know. That's all I have right now, thanks.
Commissioner Planova.
I don't have any questions at this point. Thank you.
Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we go back to the decrease in the retail picture, just, because I'm having a hard time understanding that. Yep, well, yeah, that one. So, can you, again, you said that the spot in the back, it was like a loading area, so you have that designated as a light blue, and then you said there was a corridor. So, in its place, is the corridor still there, but it's not part of the retail? Is that what you're saying?
This, what we had approved with the loading dock and the corridor, this, when you drew a line over this whole area, was, with exception, I did not count the loading dock last time, but I counted the corridor, was 12,000 square feet. I've since reduced, I've removed this corridor, and I did that for a reason, because as you look through your ordinance and try to define a restaurant space, it's based on tables per square foot and square foot per person in a bar and employees. So
that's still a corridor, though, correct?
It's still a corridor.
It's just not in it's not, you don't consider it part of the retail.
I did not count it as part of the functioning square footage of the retail.
Okay. Okay, now, the sixth floor, you said is additional 59 units, but then I think you said that it was going to be 20 additional parking spaces, but then I thought I saw where it's 49 additional parking stalls, and I think somewhere in the packet you also mentioned that it was half a floor on the sixth floor. So is that what's causing me to see, like Commissioner Creech said, the windows on the sixth floor?
Yes. Yeah, and let me this,
so
it's
can
actually...
you explain, kind of show me where that floor stops? I think in the packet there also was an overhead of the sixth floor, and maybe that would help me out.
Okay, let's start here. What's a little confusing about counting the garage spaces is that you have to define it where you start and stop per floor. So what we have here, this garage, when we say we've increased it a half a floor, we're actually right here.
Okay.
Now, what's deceiving, and it was our fault, in the previous submittal, we had an extra half a floor already added on the elevation, but not on the plans. So we had made a mistake in the original plans. So you can see here, what we're ending up with is a lower profile garage, which actually sits really nicely under the parapet of the residential component of the roof. So we've got 444 garage spaces. We previously had, and all of these numbers, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I don't remember what we had before. We had 414, I believe, earmarked for residential. Then we had 12 employee spaces in the garage, which we no longer have done.
Okay, but you did, I'm trying to figure out what page of the packet. You did show a sixth floor layout, and you did, I think in there you did differentiate and show where the half of the garage spaces were.
Page 57, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at. So is the yellow portion, the fifth floor and the cream color, that's the half sixth floor, is that right?
Yeah, the cream color is the half. Oh, wait, no,
Or is it the other way around?
The other way.
Yeah.
Start at the yellow, that's right at the 6th floor level is flat where the elevator lobby.
Oh, I see.
And then you ramp down.
Okay.
We were just trying to delineate how do we count the spaces. Like, we counted part of them toward the 6th floor and part of them.
So with that yellow portion, we're gaining an additional 49 spaces? Is that that's what I think you're
Yes,
saying,
yeah,
correct?
we're increasing the garage spaces by that amount.
Okay. I have to say that I understand why you need the 6th floor, but I think what I'm trying to figure out why you changed from the Equitone panel system and went to a hardy fiber cement board. The Equitone, I thought we were set with that, and I was kind of surprised to see that actually changed. And then I look at the courtyard view, and to me, is the entire courtyard, is that fiber cement now?
Well, the first 2 floors are all masonry. So rather than breaking it up where we had originally, each of the vertical elements had brick, then we broke it up by having panelized and then lap siding. What we ended up doing was just using brick along the entire two first floors in the courtyard, and then we used a lighter material above.
So is the lighter material above, was that the Equitone panel system?
That's well, it's the hardy panel on this.
The hardy panels.
Yeah, it's a hardy. It's a cementitious. It's the same. It's the same. It's a different manufacturer. It's the same, essentially the same material.
So can you go to like one of the elevations, and can we go back to one of those elevations like Dundee Road or something like that? Yeah, let's leave that one up on the top. So on the, yeah, that's going to be the fiber cement, right?
Yes, this is the hardy panel. This is the hardy panel here.
Right.
There's lap siding.
So has any, okay, in between, so I guess my question is, in between the hardy paneling, is anything changed in between that?
Same brick, same other materials that were, the only thing that we're asking for a change here, is not besides the window, is from Equitone to a hardy panel. Everything else remains the same. We've got Endicott iron spot brick. We've got lap siding. We've got the same materials on all of the balconies, the aluminum frame and cable system, and the same system on all of the retail that was originally proposed.
And then the courtyard views, is that all the hardy paneling that you showed on each side of the building here? Is that all been changed from kind of like the look and feel of what we had in the last PUD to, the final PUD, to what's coming to us now as a revised?
Yeah, this is what, and showing the courtyard elevations, as I was mentioning before, what we've done is, instead of having these areas here, brick, lap siding, panel, lap siding, brick all the way up, what we did was we have brick all along the bottom, all the way around the inside of the courtyard. And then we've got a panelized system above. And what we did was we looked at a lot of different options here. It was a decision we made because of the additional floor and creating a more light courtyard. So the sun more apt to reflect off of the lighter surfaces rather than having a kind of dark, heavy look on the inside of the courtyard.
So in your previous thing that we approved, floors 3 to 5, what type of material was that, and what are you proposing to go to now?
Well, I'm going to go to the next, here we go again. What we proposed before was essentially this. This doesn't show the courtyard, but it's, as you see here, it's a blend of we've got lap siding, we've got different materials as we go. Brick, two colors of brick, and then the cementitious panel.
Okay.
So what we did was we we took all of that off, cleaned it up, in our opinion, and put brick along the lower portion and then the lighter materials on the top to essentially try to reduce the darkness of the courtyard. I still believe that the courtyard is big enough, and you know, it's a lot larger than most courtyards and buildings like this at, I think, 160 feet long by 80-some feet wide, I believe.
Okay, I guess I'll say in general, I don't have the problem with the sixth floor. What I have the problem with is the material. It seems like we've lost some contrast and kind of look and feel, especially in the courtyard area. And, you know, that's just all I'm going to say for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Kalis.
Thank you, Chairman. Similar to Commissioner Powers, when the corridor how did we lose parking spots for the retail? I didn't see that. Like it went to 93 from 100 and something. Where did those go?
We in the original PUD, we had 12 spaces inside the garage.
Okay, that was
so we added units, and by adding units, we were looking to make sure that there was, you know, the perception of enough parking inside. So what we did was, since we reduced the retail a little bit, we took the parking out of the garage, and it's all on the surface.
So the 12 is the difference. It was 105. Okay, that makes sense. Everything else I had was covered, so I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Dorbin.
Thank you. I guess all my questions have been answered. Thank you.
So just to be clear on the retail, again, I hate beating a dead horse. The amount of retail that we have is, in essence, the same that you're going to be able to rent or lease.
Yes.
You just took out the unused space in your equations, okay? So that I understand. As far as the courtyard goes, which is my concern also, one, why can't we, you said it's a big courtyard anyway, and I'm sure there's some cost factors here.
Yes.
What I'm hearing on some of the board is that we'd like to see it to go back to the way it was, with as much masonry as we had prior, and maybe you can use lighter masonry than what we're talking about here.
I think there's a solution here, and I want to confer with everybody. But what I'd like to do, and I'm sorry, I just botched this up.
Take over, Brooke.
What slide would you like?
I would like. Where was I going with this? I was going to the courtyard, the elevation of the courtyard. It's right there. Yes. Since we've taken and we put a lot of brick on the first couple of floors, what we could do is, again, create that rhythm again. Perhaps we go up to the 5th floor with masonry in a couple of locations, and then introduce the other materials that we have on the other, in a couple of these bands as well. It does reduce the amount of masonry a little bit. We are trying to hold the cost down so that we can continue with the front and sky bridge elevations. But that would create a little bit more of a rhythm that would match the outside. So what we would end up doing was perhaps a band of brick up 5 stories, keeping the top floor a lighter color, and then perhaps adding in the lap siding in this location, perhaps maybe going to 3 stories or 4 stories with brick here. I think there's a way we can do it, save costs, and create a dynamic elevation.
If you could speak into the microphone, please.
Project architect for this project.
Can you give your name again?
Dina Roumeliotis, Roumeliotis. And as Joe was mentioning, I think we actually, the percentage of brick in the courtyard is equal to or greater than what was before, because we had some, vertical elements alternating with other materials in the courtyard elevations. So We took a careful look. I'm going to respectfully disagree with adding towers to the, 5-story towers to the, of brick to the elevations in the courtyard. I think that, again, to get, if this looks a little too uniform, because we really like that band of 2-story brick along the first 2 stories. I just think it's pedestrian oriented. That's kind of, it brings the brick and the masonry down to the level of people that are actually walking around in the courtyard. But we could use different colors and maybe different patterns in the upper hardy siding to create, again, those vertical elements that you so like on the other elevations. So in terms of percentage of brick, it has not been reduced, but we just didn't like the way that 5-story brick looked in the courtyard. But that's just.
May I add something?
Sure.
It just, because it was chosen not vertical, for example, it just created, because it was in the bands, it just created non-consistent. On the outside, it looked a lot better when it's just one color. It would stick out a lot better than as a band. That's what created kind of like, I just don't know why all of a sudden I know why, I understand why, but it's just 2 balconies, and then we have two windows with no balconies, and then we have one, and with the color, it would look like one piece.
I understand.
It's all different from
Right.
others.
And we do, and what you don't see here too is that like those balconies recess, and we'll have that would have like the lap siding, so you're gonna see that, yeah. But I understand that the exterior, the verticality of it did kind of
It just
give it a
looks
rhythm. So we can find a way to
So
do that.
I find your comment interesting, that you don't want to apply the same, you don't want to have the same application on the courtyard side that you do on the outside. That's what you're in essence saying.
Yes, and I think
You got to speak into the microphone.
Thank you. And again, we appreciate the suggestions. It's just that we did think that the brick is a heavier material, and that verticality in the courtyard just starts to feel like you're in a canyon where you're not, that on the outside of the building, you're on the street and it's not enclosed. But I do agree that maybe a little bit more variety in terms of the materials could, like colors and textures of the materials that we're actually using could be a way to solve that, so that everyone.
Comments? Anybody?
Well,
Bueller?
yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more variation in there. That's about it.
I guess what I was kind of hoping for is, I agree, I can see going with single hung versus casement. What I'm having a hard time with is, I thought you'd add the 6-story, we're going to keep the look and feel the same, just extending it, and a floor, keeping the stuff in there. And now it seems like we've introduced some cement fiber, quote, hardy panels on each side, and to me, it seems to take away from it a little bit.
Well, just for clarification, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to understand this, is that the hardy, you had the same material there. You had a hardy type, but it was a different manufacturer. So that's on the exterior, okay? That's what am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
It was a cementitious board. You were having a name, whatever that name was. Now you're going with hardy, which is the same type of, same material. Right, okay.
Okay.
But in the courtyard, there's less masonry.
I don't know if that's true, Chairperson Rufato. I think the
Yes,
amount of,
please.
Chair, I think the amount of masonry, there's less lap siding, but the masonry, at least what the petitioner said, is the same if not more. It's just instead of being vertical bands, it's horizontal bands for the different use than exterior versus walking around. When people are walking around the courtyard, they're not usually looking up.
Okay, so I sit corrected. So, but it's fairly stark.
You're seeing, okay.
It's fairly stark on the inside. And you went from, granted, I know you're inside in a courtyard, and you had a lot of masonry darkness, but the picture that was shown and this, I think you need to add something to this, to the courtyard.
I mean, I think, Danny, that we could certainly address that,
Yeah.
using a different text.
I think it's something we should take a look at, for sure. I mean, we sat, the full team in BSB's offices when you all first showed the elevation of the 6th floor. It was the same 5th floor courtyard elevation, just with a 6th floor added, and we all kind of went, it looks imposing, it looked too vertical, kind of a dungeon and a castle feel, monolithic almost. And so we looked for other ideas, and then I think we got the idea from the town center across the street. They had this more horizontal approach in the courtyard, which is more friendly, more pedestrian friendly. And that's really what we played with. This was almost purely an aesthetic decision. We sent it over to Andrew Jennings. He really liked it. I think he preferred it too. So that was.
And maybe we're just missing it, and.
It's getting late in the night.
Well, yeah, and if you would have gone with them and showed this instead of the other one, we might have been okay.
But
so, yeah, the band on the 6th floor it does give it some character. What could you do in the other areas? If you kept 1 and 2 masonry, so you've got 3, 4, and 5, what could you do there?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and I appreciate it, and I would wish that it wasn't respectfully. I wish you would have just swatted me down, because we went through this at the office, and there was a lot of deliberation over this. Yeah, well. And it really was felt. And my philosophy as a landscape architect is there's a pedestrian landscape and there's a highway landscape. This building is could be applied to. You've got Dundee Road and Northgate Parkway, which are really, it's a unique situation because eventually it's going to be a lot more urbanized than it is now. But right now it's 6 lanes of traffic, and that rhythm is designed so that when you drive by, you see it, and it's big, it's interesting. When you're in the courtyard, it's a pedestrian landscape. Everything is within the strike zone. It's good to have brick and warm materials next to you as you're interacting in the courtyard. Above that, lighter colors. Now, to your question, what could we do? There, on the other elevations, this is just for whatever reason, I can't figure it out. We've got different colors, and maybe that's what it is we've got a gray on the end caps. We've got a lighter gray, which we've replicated in the center. Maybe what we do is we add. Good God, I'm never going to get it right.
He really wants to.
I swear to God, it's embarrassing.
What do you want?
I wanted to get back to the courtyard, and what I think the reaction is, and I understand the reaction, is that now we've gone from essentially a very dynamic and interesting, lots of different colors and materials, to 3 or 4 different, very organized. And I think it might not be the materials as much as maybe it's the color. Maybe we use a little darker color in a couple of these bands. And I would encourage anybody to swap me down.
Maybe warmer color on that gray, a little yellowish color instead of a gray. Probably would work better.
We have warm colors on the outside, and I think adding some warm colors. Scandinavian courtyards. They use copper in their paint, so
So
because of the courtyard sparkle. We were not going to use copper, but
No, yeah. I think we're in agreement that we would probably like to see some more color in this courtyard. Brooke Mallory, what would be a suggestion on how to move forward on this? Is everybody in agreement that they would like to see some more color there? Can I just get a general nod?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We'd like you to come back with that. And in reality, if you would have had examples of this, that probably would have been helpful too. Material samples, even with what you presented, would have probably been helpful to have that. So just something to give it. And I think the general consensus is we're okay with the 1 and 2 being masonry, and 6 being that lighter color, and then 3, 4, and 5, I would assume the same material, but maybe add something with a little bit more vibe to it.
So the consensus is that this should come back to the Plan
Yes.
Commission for
Yes.
review?
Yes.
So this will be continued?
Yes, yes, it has to be continued. We just don't have enough information. Yes.
just as a point of clarification, so that we can continue to move forward, because time is really important.
Understand.
The density, parking, retail, all the other components, we'd like to know if those are acceptable so that we can resolve the color issue.
Do we have any concerns about the density and the square footage on the retail? No, we're good. Okay. Yeah, we're good. I mean, so
the next Plan Commission date is in 2 weeks, on February 22nd. Of course, we would need the plans
almost immediately.
almost immediately.
But it's limited plans.
Yeah, that's,
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, we would need them certainly by Wednesday of
right,
next week.
I believe we're okay on everything, so, I mean, everything else stays the same, you're just looking at the colors here is really,
So we're not adding any more masonry in the courtyard?
No.
We're just,
right,
because what we have in our packet and what he has on the screen here is different already.
What do you mean?
what do you mean?
The elevations. Because on his, he's showing brick on all the spots, and on mine, it doesn't show them in all of them.
This is what you have.
I'm sorry,
These are the
There's just the one elevation. The south courtyard doesn't have the brick all the way across on the first 2 floors.
It's true.
So it's not consistent. So that's part of it.
okay.
What I see. I personally would like to see, the columns again, like the exterior in a few spots.
Right.
Yeah, you're talking about these pieces right here. We'll clarify that, and when we come back.
Okay.
So we'll have that. The one thing the only timing, we'll make sure you have everything so that you can distribute the material board we would have for the meeting.
Great.
Because that would take a little bit of time to
Sure.
put together.
Right.
So you do feel like you could work within that time constraint? Because otherwise, we would have to.
We have to. The client's here. We just made a promise. So
Great.
seriously, I think the changes to the courtyard will reconvene as a team, address your concerns. I understand what they are. We'll clarify what we're doing and put together a board. As long as we can continue, because we're actually designing, we're in the design development, and we're getting into the nitty-gritty of how this building is put together, so.
Right, that's fine.
Is there no way to go back to, we already approved the courtyard last time. Are you guys agreed that we could do that? Like, We already agreed on something. Can't we just go back to that, or does it
But I
have to
don't
be
think they want-
represented?
No, no.
Okay,
No, it's changing, so.
okay.
Well, if we went back to the original masonry design
If
and
they said,
everything,
just
it's the
kidding, we're
same.
not changing the courtyard at all.
They want to change that.
Yeah, that's their
That's the
choice.
issue. Right, yes, they want to change.
Because we would approve it.
So you guys want to change the courtyard, just not in this, I got it.
Right.
Okay.
One last thing before we go, and the petitioner brought it up, the parking. It's going from 1.4 to 1.6 something. Are we okay with that?
It's going from 1.6 to 1.4.
1.6 to
It's going-
1.4,
it's being
opposite.
reduced.
Yeah, it's being reduced. I don't know how you're going to manage that. You know, most of the time, I know it's a transit-oriented district, but it is still the suburbs. But we've had this discussion before, so.
Yeah, and I'll just say something to it, Commissioner. So we are still above one space per bedroom. So I think that's important to know. So, you know, in practice, when we get into leasing this thing, there will be over a 1-to-1 ratio bedroom to parking spot.
We hope so. So we need a motion to continue?
Continue
So
to
moved.
February 22nd.
Date certain is February 22nd. We have a motion, Commissioner Dorban, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Powers. Mr. Secretary?
Commissioner Dorman,
Yes.
Commissioner Powers votes yes. Commissioner Blanova?
Yes.
Commissioner Creech?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kalis?
Yes, sir.
Chairman Rafato?
Yes. Thank you. And we'll see you in a few weeks. Thank you very much.
No, but
Here's a copy, sir, of this, just the continuation. You can take that. You don't need to sign it. You just have that copy. Thanks, yep, hope so.
You're right.
no.
Approval of minutes, January 11th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Powers and Kalis? Okay, got that. Okay. Other business. Ms. Jones?
I have nothing.
You have nothing. Okay, great. Commissioner Johnson?
The newly remodeled, renovated Burger King is now open, I see.
Ah,
Yep.
So
cool.
make sure to stop in, check it out. That's it.
Commissioner Blanova?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Commissioner Powers?
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Dorban?
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Kalis?
All set, thank you.
Commissioner Creech?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing.
Great. I just have a comment for those that live in my neighborhood. There is no garbage pickup tomorrow.
Got the email.
It's supposed to be Saturday. Just in our, whoever gets a Friday garbage collection, there is none tomorrow, so.
Sure, it'd be easier to put the cans out tonight before the snow.
Yeah, so they won't be able to get to them, so that's the interesting thing. And I have nothing either. So, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. So,